What's up, everybody? Hello and good night. Laughing at the comments. People are saying they got 10 seconds and then we're out of here.
That countdown makes me nervous, man. I know you've done this a million times, but man, something about that countdown. Okay.
Tonight we're going to talk to you guys about Tactile bass. Again, think of a better partner for this than Sheldon. We've been doing this for probably 15 or 20 years at this point, playing with different various forms of Tactile, be it subwoofers or transducers, all those kind of things. We've been to a whole lot of different rooms. We've experienced a whole lot of different setups. We've got ours dialed in pretty well at this point, and we'd like to share that with you guys. I heard a lot of compliments about your room, and I know I have a lot of compliments with my room over the years too. So I think we got it.
Oh, I wasn't talking about your room. Mine's always changing.
That's funny. So we're gonna be real informal about this. We got like some highlight comments that we're gonna go through, some different topics, and then we'll take some questions in the chat. What we're gonna do is kind of show our granular configs and how we've arrived at those, discuss that. We're going to talk about some of our experiences in the hobby as it relates to different types of transducers and what they do for you, why we might choose one or the other. And then we're going to talk about ported versus sealed near field subs. We'll kind of let the conversation meander from there. So I don't know, Sheldon, where should we get started? Any ideas?
Do you want to go back like our experiences with them, or do you want to get right into how we're setting them up and then maybe go back from there?
I think it'd be good to talk about our experience. So we had a tactile transducer shootout 10 or 15 years ago at this point, probably closer to, 10 years maybe, where we had an Aura Sound, a Clark Synthesis Silver, butt kicker minis, and we were playing around with those.
Closer to 15 than 10, yeah.
Yeah, I hooked them all up to my Brookline chairs, one per chair. I think we had 4 of them, right? Instead of 3, because I had 4 chairs. What was the 4th one? I don't remember off the top of my head. Butt kicker.
Aura.
And what was the 4th
Aura.
one?
You said that already?
Uh-huh.
Aura, Clark. Something else that starts with a C. But it wasn't a Croson.
We'd have to go back to the old thread and look.
We didn't have that kind of money.
No, we didn't.
But I don't know if you felt the same as me. I was completely unimpressed with all of them. I'm like, I don't want any of these ever.
Yeah,
I didn't like.
I think the reason why is we didn't know how to time align back then, right? We were just kind of like hooking them up and hoping for the best. We played a little bit with like high pass filters.
But we were bottoming the crap out of the butt kicker too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and the Clark Synthesis, it made like noise. It sounded like a little speaker that you could hear and that audibly, and that wasn't great. Mini was bottoming out all the time. And we later started playing with high pass filters and PEQ and that kind of stuff, trying to figure it out. But at first it wasn't great. The Aura Sound wasn't strong enough to really get anyone excited. Like, I think the takeaway from that meet was like, yeah, these all kind of stink. There's an order, a preference, and people kind of preferred either the Clark or the butt kicker generally, I think, over the Aura. But none of them were that exciting.
No, and that was before we had done near field. We hadn't done anything other than regular traditional subs. So yeah, that was the first thing. And then not too long after that, we started hearing people on the forum talking about near field subs. And that's when we both tried that, which is obviously fantastic and still is. I think the next time I experienced a transducer actually was at Craig John's, but we don't agree on what he actually had. I swear he had a Croson. Well, somebody in the comments tell us how to pronounce Croson or Croson. It's probably Croson because I always say Croson.
Yeah, we haven't really talked through what we're going to do. We were just going to kind of like clean this out live, but we did mention that we experienced either a Croson or a earthquake I-beam at.
I know we have experienced a Croson. I bought them because of that. So anyway, yeah, we were at Craig John's place. He's a big contributor on the forum, has been for years. He lives up in Pennsylvania, not far from Philadelphia. And his system was awesome. I mean, at that time, that was definitely the best I had ever heard. Same with you, I assume. Mm-hmm. And he had Crousons, at least I remember it that way. And that's why when I got back home, I got some, and then right around the same time I got a near field sub. So I had those two together from like 2014 until like 2019. But yeah, I feel like the Crowson, whatever, was awesome. I really liked it. Felt good, but I just wanted more, and I had two, so I bought another one. Then I had two, and it still was like, it's not enough. Like what it was doing, I liked, but yeah, I just wanted more feel. It is cool. I do remember putting the test tones on that and going all the way down to, I believe, 3 hertz. You could feel all the way down to 3 hertz on that, on those, which is pretty impressive, but just not strong enough. I don't know. So, do you remember coming over and checking those out? I know you were over a bunch during the years.
Sure. Sure. I always felt like the Crowson were a little subtle for my taste. Like
what if they were subtle for you, then they were way subtle, because you like it a lot more subtle than I do. Wouldn't you say?
Compared to what we have now, yeah. I mean, I always just felt like when you showed me your near field versus your Crowson, like the Crowson didn't do anything compared to the near field anymore. That was my take. I've helped Crowson at multiple houses at this point. They're not bad. I really like them. They're probably one of the more natural transducers, but I think that what I felt them with is a little subtle and more than I care.
Yeah, and if you're going for ease of setup, other than getting the timing right, it's as easy as it gets. Just put it under a chair leg and good to go. You know, get the isolators under the other 3, or get 2 of them and use 2 isolators. But yeah, so if you want easy and don't want to end up cutting into your chairs or other crazy kind of stuff, Crowson is the way to go.
So I started with a 10-inch near field in this house, and I tried near field ported captivators at my old house. So that would have been 2011, 2012, 2013 with the ported captivators. I tried it briefly, didn't like it. I figured out why I didn't like it later. I just liked far field subs back then. When I tried near field for the first time, near field sealed, I fell in love with it almost immediately. And I tried it first with
that was the Infinity, right?
Yep. Infinity Kappa Perfect 10 sealed. I just lifted it up to back height, got it real close to the chair, and was like, holy smokes, this is awesome. I started calling all the buddies, called Luke, called Sheldon, said, like, you guys got to try this. And then, you know, just graduated from there. We've tried a whole bunch of different stuff down our path. Like those 3 that we mentioned earlier, the 4th, I can't even remember right now. I bought and tried. Tried 10-inch near field, 12-inch near field. I don't think I ever tried a 15. I tried 18 near field. I've tried different forms of ported, 10, 12, 18 ported. Sheldon's got a 24-inch sealed now as near field. Doug has a 24-inch sealed near field. We've tried horn subs near field over Doug's house. Sealed.
That was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, like we've pretty much gone the gamut. We've tried Hover Boss. You've got Hover Easy now, so we've tried that. Direct attached ends up being my favorite besides near field, and then butt kickers, you know, it still have their place in my opinion, especially like something that's a little bit heavier duty like the Advance or the LFE. And they all have a very different feel. And not only do they all have a very different feel, but they all have a different feel based on where you place them. So you can get one feel and then move it somewhere else and get a totally different feel. So you sort of have to play around with where you're going to mount any kind of tactile transducer. Even if it's Crowson, you got to figure out whether you're going to put it on the carpet or put it below the carpet. I know Sheldon played with that. So there's a lot of like tinkering with this stuff. It's rarely set and forget because you're missing out on the best experience. And I think how I kind of want to open this conversation was in 2022 at the first M-Wave. There was an industry expert up there that was talking about bass, and he was talking about tactile transducers at one point. And he said something to the effect that tactile transducers are just for novices. Nobody can ever dial them in correctly. I've been doing this for 30 years and nobody yet has ever done it. And, you know, if people start, they get a little smile and then they just get rid of them or don't use them anymore. Don't turn them on because you can't get them dialed in right. Then they don't feel natural. And the only real solution is just adding active subwoofers, you know, like real subwoofers and not tactile transducers. So he said, just ignore the tactile transducers. Don't down that road. I'll save you a bunch of money. And while he was saying that, I was just thinking, that's just so wrong. Like you've missed the boat, man. You haven't experienced a good setup with tactile transducer, and that's fine, but you're given bad information because I really feel like truly 100% the tactile transducers can be dialed in and absolutely enhance your bass experience from your far field subwoofers. And I know, Sheldon, you feel the same way. It was just kind of a interesting thing to hear from an industry expert. And I think that's really bottom line. I think that's what a lot of people think in this hobby, or a lot of people have experienced. And in fact, we started there too, like we talked about, where it just doesn't feel natural. It's fun. You get a little grin and then you turn it off because it doesn't feel right. Well, part of that is getting it dialed in. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight with configs and how you do your timing delays and how you might apply a HPF or low pass filter, a high pass filter or low pass filter to make it better. So we're going to actually share our configs with a screen share and talk through this. Do you have anything to add before we kind of dive into the granular configs?
I guess I'm glad I wasn't there. I was out of town that first year of M-Wave. I would have started booing and hissing that guy. What is he talking about? I mean, I guess I should take a step back. I was, like you say, I was in the same boat after I experienced that for the first time at your place. So yeah, he says he's tried it for 30 years. He hasn't tried all that hard.
I think, well, he was like a configurator, calibrator, system seller stuff. So he'd been around the block, and he just said he'd never felt them implemented right in all of his years. And that tells you something, right? I mean, that people generally aren't getting these correct. And I think that's basically true, because a lot of times when we go to other enthusiasts' house on our little home theater tours and crawls that we used to do more frequently, have lately, a lot of times they're just off a little bit. And, you know, we can help. Hopefully people will take note of some of the little tips here and dive in at the forum. You know, there's a big long thread that helps you get your feet wet on how to do these kind of tunings and really get it to where it's dialed in and enhances your experience. Nobody wants to detract from their experience. Let's make them better. So that's our goal here.
So yeah, obviously the biggest thing must be the lack of using negative delay. Is what must have happened to that guy and all of his experiences. That must have been what happened to us in our first one. Yeah, because not all of these devices are the same. Why is my camera moving? I'm a hand talker. My camera's moving. Okay. Not all these devices are the same. Some of them need more negative delay than others. And what I mean by negative delay is you want the signal to fire from the tactile response, whichever style you're using, earlier than the other subwoofers, the other traditional subwoofers, which doesn't seem to make sense. It sounds like, and it didn't make sense to me the first time I read about it too. It's like, well, won't you feel that early? Well, no, for whatever reason, some of them, especially the butt kicker, Krausen 2, Hover Boss, and Hover Easy as well. Now, the drivers I have in my seat backs are not that way, and I haven't found that my near field sub is that way. Jonathan, you might correct me. Maybe you do it.
Yeah, I don't need to have at least enough advanced to really notice it. Like I let Odyssey set my near field distances and turn Odyssey off, so I don't have to add extra. Correct.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I let it figure out the distance and just use that. But yeah, those others, the butt kicker, the Krausen, the Hover Easy, the Hover Boss, if you don't have them fire early, you're not going to feel it in time. And I don't know why that is, if it takes a second to rev it up or whatever, in the case of the butt kicker and the Krausen. With the hover stuff, you'd think it would be a little quicker because it's the drivers right there, but in my experience, in my room anyway, I have to have it hit just a little bit early. So I think that's the biggest thing why some people, even experts, might think they don't work right, is because they haven't, had the negative delay to get it to hit at just the right time. And you can't just guess on it. You need to be playing content. I've got a song that I use, and it's got a nice sharp kick drum that can help you dial it in. You need to have something like that. You can't just kind of guess and play it by ear. So
I have a theory on why they need a little bit of advanced time. And I've got a butt kicker here. I'm going to take it apart. So this is a butt kicker advance. I took the top off just now. Inside is a 1 pound steel slug. So, a driver moving mass is just the weight of the cone, which is nothing. But this has got a magnetic slug in there, and it's a fairly large, heavy slug. It's 1 pound, and that moving mass has to spin up. And I think it takes a little bit longer to activate. I mean, I think it's just as simple as that for these butt kickers, that they need to have a little bit of extra time to fire because it's such a heavy device and it has to get moving. That's my uneducated theory, but it certainly matters. So like the way I handle it with my delays is for my butt kickers, I'll go in and take my longest distance sub that Odyssey has calibrated, and I'll add 5 feet distance to it. So my front subs are set to 11 feet. For the tactile transducer channel, I put that at 16 feet, and that makes it fire faster, makes it fire earlier, because the receiver views the distance as like a time alignment. If something's at 16 feet, it has to fire off earlier to arrive at the same listening position as something that's 11 foot away. So it just increases the speed at which it fires relative to the other subwoofer drivers, and that's enough to really dial in that butt kicker to get the time lines just right. Like Sheldon said, if you're playing a kick drum track and there's like a impulse kick, if you don't have that time alignment right on the butt kicker, very specifically at 1 pound slug, you'll get like a kick. It won't be a single impulse response. It'll be a multiple, and it's not good at music at all when it's like that. So you dial it in very clearly by having an extra, basically negative delay, if you will, but it's not negative delay. It's just making it fire faster. And then that impulse response will be aligned, and it feels like the bass drum is the bass drum with the transducer. Like there's just a single hit. And we're going to go into that really clearly, how we do that with our mini DSPs, and talk through that.
Hey, Jonathan, before we do that, I do want to make this point, and I think you experienced it too when you were over here. Like the butt kicker has to be exact, right?
Oh, yeah.
But the others, there's a window there. There's a larger window where it's, and I kind of wish it wasn't. I wish it was like, with like the butt kicker where you go one over or one too much or one not enough, and then ooh, that's perfect. It's not really that way with the Hover EZ, and it's not that way with the driver in the back of the chair. There's a little more leeway in there, maybe like within like 1 millisecond, something like that, give or take. Would you agree with that?
I agree with that as it relates to near field subs, and as it relates to a lesser extent the seat back subs. But I feel like the butt kicker is probably the one that requires the most exactness, and
that's what I'm saying.
The direct attached subwoofers also seem to be pretty finicky in that regard, in my opinion, where they need to be real steady. But the far field subs, if it's a little bit off, you'll notice on a frequency response graph, you probably won't hear it. The near field subs, if it's a little off, it'll be the same thing. Like you have some play, but the direct attached stuff and the heavy.
So that's interesting. So you're saying, because when you were over here, it was give or take. It was kind of like when I did. It was give or take about 1 millisecond. It was in that window. You're like, oh, that's all pretty good. But for the ones you put in your chair, you're saying it was very specific. Like
I feel like they're more specific than perhaps yours are when I'm dialing them in. Like if I go up 2 or 3 clicks on the mini DSP or down 2 or 3 clicks, it's noticeable, where it wasn't really noticeable in your house when we were doing the 12s. And that might be the mounting distance, or it might be how they're attached to the wood, or what, or the chair themselves, the resonance of the chair, all that kind of stuff would apply. That's something else we figured out, is that if you get a certain feel with a certain particular type of transducer and you try it on a different chair, it probably is not going to feel the exact same way, because all these chairs have their own like internal resonances, and all that applies to the whole situation. So it's
absolutely. So I've got 3 different feels in this room. Like this chair and this chair, my 2 like kind of thinner chairs, they're the same brand, same everything, so they feel the same, other than the fact that I have a 24 near field behind me, so that makes it a little different. But then my 2 outside chairs, they're the same brand as each other, but they're different than my middle chairs. They have a different feel. And then the couch has a different feel too. All of them good, just different. So sometimes you have to take that into account and change the settings a little bit. On my couch, I have to turn down the driver that's firing into your back about 4 or 5 dBs from the drivers that are in the front. I do that on the Inuk software. That's the amp that's powering them. Otherwise, it's way stronger in the back than it is the front row, even though the drivers are like the same distance from you. It's just different furniture. It fires through it differently. So yeah, but furniture plays a big role in how you're going to feel the TR device for sure.
Yeah, and not only furniture, but what it's mounted on. Is it on a concrete slab? Is it on a wooden riser? Is it on a wooden floor? All that stuff plays into it, because like you just said, on my I have 6 identical seats. But on the riser, they have to have a slightly different tuning to feel where I like it as compared to on the concrete slab in the front row. So there's definitely some like subjective tuning that is involved along the way.
Do you remember if you have to give them more power or less power for the ones that are on the riser?
I do a little less power on the riser because I think there's some natural shake
Yeah.
in the riser itself, and so it doesn't
That
need
makes
as
sense.
much. Maybe it's
Yeah.
turned down 2 to 4 dB on the two different types of devices that I'm using for the riser. I also noticed another thing that I noticed is that with the butt kickers, it seems like if you have them at the same level as the front chairs, there's a little extra bounce that continues to happen on the riser that doesn't happen on the concrete. So that's not desirable because it's almost like a little overhang or something that happens. So just dropping the level a couple dBs, 2 or 3 dBs, 4 dBs seems to help in that regard too.
And that's a solid riser. I mean, I remember we built that thing. That's very solid.
It's made with 2x8s and 4x4s supports, and it's braced really, really well, but it still is not as solid as concrete, of course. So there's still a little difference there.
Yeah, imagine it on Luke's riser.
His reference is that Luke intentionally made a very flimsy riser with very little support, and it's like thin plywood, and the whole intent was to get that thing bouncing. And
it does.
Yeah, he's got a butt kicker LFE on that riser, and it really moves. And that was his intent. It's pretty fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so should we go into our configs a little bit, or what do you think?
Yeah, let's do that. You want to go first, or you want me to?
Sure, I can go first. So I think I'm going to share my screen on this, and we're just going to kind of talk through these different stages. And if I'm not, Sheldon, you keep an eye on comments, if you will. I haven't even been watching comments so far. We'll have to go back and kind of catch up on that, maybe at the end or something, or you can keep track. If you see any questions, pop them up.
Oh, I didn't even have them clicked. I thought nobody was commenting. There's all kinds of comments.
Okay,
that's my bad.
I'm going to share just my entire screen here, and it's going to do weird things for a second, but that's okay. So the first thing I'm probably going to talk about is the AV10 settings, and I'm going to go into speakers and distances, and we're going to talk about that. So what I like to do, can you see this okay, Sheldon?
What? Oh, sorry, I was reading the comments. I can't do two things at once.
It's okay.
Yeah, I can see that.
You can see it? All right.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to talk through this. Odyssey sets my distances, and you guys are familiar with that process. Any of your different auto EQ processes will set distances. What I want you to know is that I have my front 5 subwoofers all basically daisy chained together off subwoofer 1, and Odyssey calibrates that front bank of 5 subwoofers to 8 to 11 feet. And then my near field subs, as close to the seatback chairs as can be with the allowance for the recline mechanism, it sets those to 4.3 feet. They are closer than 4.3 feet, but you don't have to worry about that physical message or measurement being exactly what physical is, because there's amp DSP delays. If there's any kind of filters applied, if the amp has any processing delays, that all gets calculated in there, and your auto EQ system will calculate that distance for you. So my near field subs are at 4.3 feet. Now for my butt kicker and for my seat back 8s, and we're going to talk about these briefly. The butt kicker advances are the thing that I showed you with the 1 pound slug. I have 1 per chair, and they're mounted on the box frame of the chair itself. It's very important that you realize this. Mounted on the box frame where the seats springs attach. I tried mounting them underneath. There's like a bracket, and maybe I'll show some pictures later, but I don't have them pulled up right now, so I'm not gonna worry about it. There's different types of brackets they sell. Sometimes they'll put a butt kicker kit that goes underneath one leg of the chair, that sort of thing. I don't think any of that stuff works as well. I've fooled around with that sometimes. I've tried to make my own little bracket system and brace system underneath the chair. None of that works as well, especially on my particular Manwa chairs. When I was trying those, like, say you just have a 6-inch by 21-inch board, if you will, but it's made out of steel or it's made out of wood or whatever, and you're stretching the span of the bottom frame, and you mount it in there with bolts, and it's solid, and you put the butt kicker on top of that span. What was happening to me with the Manwa is like maybe my right thigh and my left kidney would shake, but it wasn't uniform across the chair. And if I moved to the other side, it'd be the opposite: left thigh, right kidney, that kind of stuff. Like it wasn't equally distributing the shake through the chair. I tried multiple different mounting positions throughout the chair. I never found one I liked until I stuck it on the seat frame itself. So the springs that attach to the foam that attach to where you sit, that box where the springs are attached is where you want to mount it to. That's proven out to me twice. It proved out with the Berkline chairs I had before, and it proved out with the Manwas chairs I have now. So that's regarding placement. I add 5 feet, like I talked about, from the farthest distance, and that gives me that negative delay, if you will. That makes the butt kicker advance fire off before the subwoofers, and that's the key element we're talking about. This isn't an exact number. This is just adding some time in there to make them fire faster, and then I set the exact number in the mini DSP, which we'll talk about in a minute. So subwoofer 4 is the same thing. Now, another thing, and this may be an opinion that other people will disagree with, but this is my opinion. If you want to have Odyssey enabled, you're going to have trouble if you have Odyssey applying EQ to subwoofer output you're using, because the EQ that's applied for a subwoofer in your room is probably not the EQ that you want applied to your tactile transducer. Now, there's ways around that. You could use one of the Odyssey tools that you could basically offset the EQ with your mini DSP that is applied. So if Odyssey is dropping it 6 dB at 40 hertz or something, then you could look at that with one of the tools that shows what Odyssey is doing and then add 6 dB at 40 hertz and try to get back to a flat line with PEQ applied to your mini DSP. But that's more complicated than it's worth. In my opinion, you'd rather just have a flat subwoofer LFE output for your tactile transducers and just work with it from there. Much easier to do that than to try to counter what Odyssey is doing to your live subcalibration. So this is real easy and comfortable to me because I don't like running Odyssey other than just to set distances and then I turn it off. So to me, I'm not losing anything. I just set it to 16 and 16. There's no EQ applied to any of my subs in that regard from the system here. Now, we've got the butt kicker and the seat back firing in advance of the subs. So that's where we need to start. And now I'm going to show you the mini DSP and how I have that setting. So the way I have this set up is input 1 comes from subwoofer 3. And input 2 comes from subwoofer 4 on my AV10. So the front 5 subs are configured off subwoofer bank 1. The 3 near field subs are configured off subwoofer bank 2. Subwoofer bank 3 is going into input 1 of mini DSP, and subwoofer 4 is going to input 2 of mini DSP. Now you see that this says butt kicker front row and butt kicker rear row. They're both feeding off input 1, which is subwoofer out 3. And on the seat back front row and the seat back rear row, those are going off subwoofer 4, which is feeding input 2 of the mini DSP. You'll probably have to, if you're watching this from home and trying to follow along, if you have to stop and rewind it, go ahead and do so. But what I'm trying to say is I want the front row of chairs. I want the front row of chairs to be doing butt kicker front row and butt kicker rear row. That way subwoofer 3 controls my butt kickers. And I want subwoofer 4 to control the in-seat 8-inch seat backs on both front row and rear row. And so now I'm going to be setting my delays. And this you're dialing in with a song list. So I have an Apple TV song list. I'm going to throw that in chat right now, actually. And you guys can use that or even tell me some other songs at some point that you've found that you like to use. Let me get this back up with StreamYard, and I'll share that for people to kind of look at. How about this?
Hey, Jonathan.
Yes.
My favorite comment so far was, is that dude using a U mic for his mic?
Yes,
he is. It works.
Okay. It works really good, actually. He sounds real nice compared to the different other mics that we tried.
Well, I always sound real nice.
Okay, so back at this, I put the tactile transducer list in there. What you'll do is you'll play something that has some good bass with your system running, and then you're going to set your delays, and you're going to come in here with a keyboard from your main listening position. Probably just use a wireless keyboard or get a long extension, and you're going to dial this up or down by hand. So you're going to, like, you push up or down arrow, and it's going to cycle in and set these delays. And what you're going to find, in my experience with the butt kickers especially, is it's so precise that if I go up or down one off what I had it at, you'll start feeling, it'll feel like a longer or shorter amount of bass when that tactile bass hits, especially with a real quick snappy kick drum. And what you're going to find is when you get it dialed in perfectly, that longer feeling is going to disappear. And what you kind of feel more at the tactile transducer will sort of melt away into just like what sounds like acoustic energy or feels like acoustic energy. You will not it will be almost like you lower the volume on your tactile transducer when you get it dialed in properly. So it's really pretty easy to get it right because it sort of goes away. And at that point, once it goes away, then you can turn it up and it feels more natural. So it feels like you got 2 beats. If you're really off, it starts feeling like a longer beat as you get closer, and then it kind of goes away completely as you get it dialed into the exact millisecond. Once it's dialed into that, and then this is even hundreds of milliseconds if you look here, because it's 0.08. When you get dialed in exactly, the feel kind of goes away, and then you increase the volume to get the feel back to what you want. So that's how you're going to dial in that delay. You're going to do that for each of these devices. So in the front row, I'm going to sit in my main listening position, the MLP, and I'm going to dial in both my butt kicker, and then I'm going to go to the rear row, and I'm going to dial in the butt kicker there. So you can see there's a little different delay setting. That's to make it match with what you're hearing from the main speakers and from the subs. And then for the seat back, in every seat, I have 2 8-inch subwoofers, and they are direct mounted to the wooden frame of the seat. The goal there is to apply the shake that the subwoofer does, a very natural shake, and it's directly attached to the subwoofers. It's directly attached to the seat frame, so your seat back really vibrates nicely. The 8-inch doesn't really drive like the 18-inch near field does, but what it does do is allow the subtle nuance like piano chords or guitar strings or something like that to feel very natural and comfortable. And so at lower volumes, they really add to the experience. And then at higher volumes, they get overtaken by the butt kicker advance and the near field 18. So on that, you also will set delays, play the same tracks, go up and down, use your mouse and keyboard and go up and down until you kind of feel where it feels most natural. Now, these are added delays because I'm having to increase delay to offset the early firing that I did through the AVR by increasing distance. Now, that gets the time alignment right. After that, you have to do the parametric EQ or the crossovers. I really right now just use crossovers. If you really wanted to get into it, you could do PEQ and say like, all right, my chair has a natural resonance at 42 hertz. I'm just making that up. But you have a natural resonance of 42 hertz. I'm going to put a little notch filter in the 42 hertz and kind of get rid of that resonance. I haven't really taken it to that level. I don't necessarily know the need for it, but if you really, really, really wanted to fine tune, you could go that direction too. So let's talk about the butt kicker crossover. I have only I don't have an HPF. The butt kicker vents don't need HPF. They'll play all the way down. I've never had them bottom out by any stretch of the imagination, like nothing. No, I've never made a bad sound. But I have a cutoff frequency with a Butterworth 6 dB per octave at 44 hertz. So that means on this particular unit, this is the butt kicker front row, I'm rolling off any frequency above 44 hertz at 6 dB per octave. An octave is a doubling of frequency. So if I have a 44 hertz frequency, by 88 hertz, I'm going to be 6 dB down. And the next cycle up, closing in on 200 hertz, I'm going to be 12 dB down. So that's how those frequency filters work. You have different options in here. You can play with them and see what you like. I just like a very natural low roll-off filter. And so the lightest filter is this Butterworth 6 dB per octave. That's my preference. The butt kickers themselves, in my opinion, don't feel as natural up with the higher frequency bass. They kind of get into like a teeth rattling sensation. Not my favorite. Gets kind of like a nasty mechanical feel. They're better off really moving the chair around when you have low frequency stuff. Most realistic, most imperceivable from being just acoustic energy at the low frequency things for the butt kicker. So now we'll go back. Those are going to be kind of the same between the butt kicker front row and the butt kicker rear row. I think I have a slightly different cutoff frequency because basically, like we talked about, they'll feel a little bit different based on what kind of footing they have, based on if they're on wood or concrete, that kind of thing. So my other row has a 42 hertz cutoff frequency. That's just tuned to taste. Again, no HPF, but butt kicker events don't need it. Now the seat back, I've played with these quite a bit, and I've come to kind of an unusual setup, perhaps. But what I wanted to share here is that I roll off, again, this Butterworth 6 dB per octave. I roll off anything below 40 hertz with those in-seat back 8-inch subs, a couple of them per chair. And the reason I do that is because they're open air subwoofers. They're sitting inside the seat back, and they kind of get out of control a little bit if you have the lower frequencies, and they sort of feel like they're hanging a little bit. So you don't want that. So I have them set to 40 hertz. It rolls off gently below that. And I also have a cutoff frequency above, again, another light 6 dB per octave roll off, and it starts at 95 hertz. And this is just subjective preference, right? Like if I change this to 120 hertz or whatever, and I use it like that, what I find is that it doesn't feel as natural as that goes higher. So it makes the chair activate a little bit more. It doesn't feel as nice. I end up actually just liking, I think they had this at 95. Get that back.
Yeah,
I
95.
I actually just ended up liking having that slightly lower roll off. And so again, a doubling of frequency, it's going to roll off 6 dB. So at 180, 190 hertz, it's going to be down another. It's going to be down 6 dB. So that's how I have my stuff set up in the mini DSP for the two types of transducers, the butt kicker and the seat back. I want to talk a little bit about Behringer Inuks while I'm here, because I have played with that in the past, and I think there's at least one thing I want to show you guys with the Inuks, and that's this voltage limiter. I've played with this in regards to my seat backs, but I found I didn't need it, so I just disabled it because I'm not even anywhere near the power that I would need to worry about limiting it before I get the feel I need. Originally, I was worried I was going to overdrive the drivers, but with the 40 hertz HPF on the seat backs and the idea that I don't use that much power because I don't want them to be localizable. That's not the right word, but it's the intent. I mean, because there's 2 8s in the seats, they're almost like headlights firing into your kidneys if they're too hot. Like you can localize where the feel is coming from if the driver cone gets moving too much. So I like to keep those limited where they're just making the chair shake a little bit, but not moving the cone enough that I can feel where they are located. So I don't use the limiter, but if I did use a limiter, this is something that's very nice with the NX series or the Inuk series. You can say, all right, my near field transducer is 4 ohm, and I'm going to limit it to 250 watts. That kind of thing. You can dial this in and limit how much power you're going to give your transducer. So if you get like an Aura sound or something that's kind of low power rating, and maybe you can only give 100 watts, then you can dial that in. And the limiter on these NX series or Inuk amps is actually very solid. There's been some bench tests over avsforum by Not NYT and some of the different guys that have an oscilloscope and really review these things strongly. And they say the limiting feature works really well. Like it's not squaring off the waves. It's not doing bad things. It just limits the output. So you can have this limiter and not worry about blowing up your device. That may or may not come into effect if you buy a 3,000 watt amp and you're running one transducer. It probably comes into effect. You'd want to make sure you're not going to overpower your device and cause issue. In this same vein, I want to be clear. The gain knob on the amp is actually gain input attenuation knob. So that little circle knob that a lot of people think is like a volume when you're first in the hobby, it's not a volume. It's a gain matching structure knob. And so realistically, truly, you can get full power out of an amplifier at the lowest indent. So if you turn the knob all the way to the left and just go up one knob, you could still get, if you have 3,000 watt amp, you could still get 3,000 watts out of that amp at the lowest knob. So don't think for even a second that you're not going to burn out your transducer because you only have it at 3 clicks up or something. That's not how that works. That reduces the incoming voltage in order to match the gain stage that you want. So if you had very high incoming voltage, that's when the lower settings on that gain attenuation knob would give you full power. Traditional, like consumer brand Yamaha, Onkyo, Denon, they're not probably going to have enough voltage to make that cause you trouble at the lowest stages. But if you're using boutique receivers, or if you have some sort of pre-pro that has very high output voltage, you can certainly put a lot more voltage into your amplifier, which in turn turns out to a lot more power going out to your transducer than you realize very quickly. So I want to put that little caveat on there. That's why these kind of voltage limiters or wattage limiters, peak limiters, however you want to word it, depending on how you're looking at it, are really advantageous, especially if you're new to the hobby and don't know exactly what you're doing. You can kind of keep yourself safe with that sort of thing. I think that kind of covers the basics of how my stuff is set up. Let me stop sharing and see if we had any questions that I should address, and then we'll go into yours, Sheldon.
Yeah, so while you're looking at that, our buddy Ryan asked on the comments early on, a long time ago, says, but Carp, you have so much bass. What problem does tactile bass solve? Was it a capabilities issue? And of course, he knows what he's asking, and he says a leading question. Yeah, I forgot to mention the whole purpose for tactile for me is I love the feel. and I can get really, really good feel from all these subs. I mean, I've got in each corner of the room, I have 4 18s, and then behind me, I've got a 24 near field. Even without the near field, I mean, I can get plenty of feel, but I have to either crank up the master volume way too high, or I have to run the subs way too hot, or both. And it's really fun, but it hurts my ears, and it doesn't take long to hurt my ears. The older I get, the more quickly it hurts my ears. So that was a huge motivating factor, is I want like the violent feel, the tactile feel, but I don't want ear damage to get there. Plus, I'm not in like a dedicated built, home theater room with like 2 layers of drywall and all this other stuff. It's my house used to make terrible sounds with the bass. And not only would my ears hurt, but my house sounded terrible. So Tactile kind of solves a couple of things at once. So that's why I need it. I did on our M-Wave tour, the scene that I got the most feedback from, the most positive feedback, was the Hacksaw Ridge cannons off the ship. And I was running that at like +5, and I think the last demo was 6 over reference, and but really quick, like just crazy loud. Well, the next day I was trying it again, and I just wanted to see what I could feel from just the traditional 4-corner subs, no near field, no tactile, no nothing. And so I turned the subs up and cranked the volume up, and yeah, it was awesome. Like, I got a ton of feel from that, but my ears started hurting pretty quickly, even from that quick little scene. So I'm sure I'm not alone. There's plenty of other people that don't want to go deaf, but love the feel, that tactile sensation that you get. So yeah, thanks, Ryan. I forgot to mention that. Any other comments you want to answer now, Jonathan, or you want to look at that later? Or
I'm still catching up, so you can go ahead and start sharing your settings, and then we'll go on.
Okay. Oh, somebody asked me why I have 2 projectors. Oh, looks like Ryan already answered it. Yeah, so there's the Epson 5040, which is the one that's on. I think you can see that there. You can sell those now for like $700 or something like that. I mean, I'd rather keep it and just use it as like my daily driver, I guess. I use that for if I'm on the internet, listening to music, YouTube, whatever, which is a lot. I listen to a ton of music. And then I just use the JVC NZ7 for shows and for movies, that kind of thing. So greatly reduces the amount of hours that I'm putting on the laser. I know most people don't think it matters, but you don't understand how often that Epson is on. It's on every day, like all the time, especially in the summer. When I'm on break, I'm a teacher, so a lot of downtime. So anyway, all right. As far as my settings,
pause right there, because I do have a comment.
Sure.
So 314 Carpenter, we know him from various meets and stuff. His name is Chris in real life. So industry experts like Poe and Gramani recently said there is no near field. I couldn't disagree more. I don't know what they're saying. So Chris, if you're in the comments still, like, let us know if you have any more to elaborate on that. I mean, it's plain as day that there is such a thing, and as you walk near it, you'll feel more. When I had my stack of 4 in the corner flanking my screen on each side, and you walked, say, 2 to 3 feet away from the subs, every inch you'd go closer, you felt more and more bass. If I had an SPL meter, it wouldn't be getting significantly louder with those inches that you're coming closer, but the physical effect of the, what do they call it, Sheldon, on the forum? It's like particle acceleration type, particle velocity. Some of it gets like a little bit iffy, mysterious, but that cone movement is only tactile, or is most tactile, the closer you get to the driver. And it's just, there's not even like any arguing against it. You just walk up to the driver and your shirt will start moving around. Your lungs will start moving around. Your skin tingles, your hair moves, like, and the SPL is not going to be that different than 2 foot away. But if you're 6 inches away, you feel all that, and every inch matters. So absolutely, I disagree with them 100% on that statement at its face.
You just wonder, like, how many, obviously they've experienced way more setups than we have. I mean, I guess they don't hang out with crazy people like we do that would dare to put subwoofers right up against the back of their chair, and even worse than that, cut into the chair.
Oh, yeah.
And here's another thing that I think is true. And my friend Ray, from down in Houston, or a suburb of Houston, he was recently over here. He goes by Amira, if I'm pronouncing it right, on avsforum. You know him, Jonathan.
Yes, absolutely.
He switches things a lot, just like I do, which is why I like the guy, because he's never happy. I'm not either. I'm always tweaking stuff. But he had near field 24s, stereo integrity 24s right behind him, and he's like, I'm not getting as much as I was for my 15. So he put his 15s back in there, and what he's realized, and he showed me the picture too, his 15s are on a slanted box, and when he sits in like his natural recline, not reclined very far, but reclined a little bit in his main seat, it's like that far to the drivers, right? And in their 15s. Well, the 24 was not in a slanted box. It was just straight up and down, kind of like mine is. So it had to be a little bit further away to let him recline and all that. And I think that's a factor too. I mean, it's exactly with what you're saying. Every little inch that you're further away makes a difference. And I don't think it matters if you have a more powerful driver. You will still beat that driver if you have a smaller driver and it's closer, within reason, of course.
And very critical to that statement, that the smaller driver has more excursion, because the excursion is what is making that feel. So in talking to Ray, he said his 24-inch driver was barely moving at all to get the SPL he was comfortable with in his room, and therefore he wasn't feeling the particle velocity, if you will, the air movement that's coming off the cone, whereas 15 was boogieing down and making that feel occur.
Right. But he sat right here. He came over that Friday and had me crank up my 24, and mine's a little bit further away, like his would have been, and cranking mine up, like, and we watched it. I mean, like, lots of excursion. It was really good. He felt it, but he's like, it's not the same as those 15s within an inch of the entire back of his chair. Like, his chair just like perfectly lines up with those drivers like that. So yeah, saying there's no near field, like, okay, sure. I mean, that's fine. People can think that. Just, try it for yourself. And
yeah, I mean, I'd put that in the same category as the expert we talked at the beginning of the show about, the M-Wave expert, who said there's no such thing as a good transducer, just rubbish, get rid of them. That's just not true.
Yeah. No. Yeah, to me, they're the most fun part of the entire hobby, I would have to say. It's like my favorite aspect of it. So if it doesn't work, it's fooling me pretty well, because I love them.
So I'm reading down, I'm catching up on the comments. It looks like Nicholas says that Poe said if you want to achieve waveforming, so now the category is a little bit different. You need to sacrifice near field subs to achieve the waveforming. That would be like the art waveforming, stuff like that.
I don't care. I think I'm out on the waveforming.
Yeah, that's interesting discussion. We don't have to pigtail into that too far, but I had Dirac art with the waveforming in here in my room. We tried it at one point, and I've talked about this on one of the AV Experience podcasts. I'll talk about it a little bit more just briefly here. I think there can be such a thing as perhaps too clean of bass. Everyone in here did not like it with the waveforming, and I had 5 or 6 different people test it. Did not like it as much as just the normal bass configuration. It sounded a little bit. I mean, and I've experienced the same thing at M-Wave when they did the M-Wave between waveforming on and off, a tiny bit cleaner, but not as enjoyable. Like, just not as enjoyable. Didn't feel like it vibrated your body quite as much. Didn't give you that bass tactile sensation that we enthusiasts really crave. And turning it up isn't really the answer, because the SPL wasn't really changing. It was there's something with humans, and like Marantz did this for a long time. They actually added distortion back in. I think there's something with the way we're built that we know and expect and like a little bit of distortion, or maybe that's wrong technically, but subjectively it's right, and I've experienced it in multiple ways. And that's my thoughts on it. So I don't know.
I was in your room to experience that, and I'm not saying it was bad. Now, some clips I liked it and some I didn't, but overall, there is no way. And it was kind of nice to know that I don't have to worry about spending all that money, you know? So yeah, so I'll keep my near field and not do that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it looks
Back.
like the comments are just kind of saying that was sort of a misquote. It's just near field in relation to waveforming. Then there's no way. I mean, you and I have talked about this before. I'm not giving up near field anymore. Like I tried it with the forefront left and right, and I tried subs to directional bass around the room, and there's no replacement for near field. Even with just the 2 8-inches and the seat back and the butt kicker, and you can get most of the way there, but near field still adds an element that nothing else in my experience has added or has met.
And especially in your room, you have the magical room where with your 5 subs up front and your 3 behind, your frequency response is just crazy good. Not only in the seats, but like everywhere in the room. Because oftentimes we're up walking around while the music's playing or whatever, and it sounds great and punchy and tight everywhere. So yeah, in your room, man, there's no way. I was sad when I came over those few times where we had all the subs in the corners. Like, this is not Jonathan's room. This is not. I think the most important aspect of your room is to keep those subs forever where they are. Don't ever move them.
After I'd kind of spent 6 months moving things around and not had near field, I'd never really got to the point where I felt like they were completely replaceable, but you kind of get used to it a little bit. Like, and so I decided before I cement this, I'm going to move back and try near field again. This was about a month before the M Wave this year. And after they were back, I was like, yep, it's as good as I remember. I cannot match it. I can't match it with transducer, and I cannot match it with seatback. Now, that being said, they're all cumulative, and we've talked about that before too. Each one adds, and each one is beneficial in addition to. It's not like I'm saying near field alone is sufficient and the others are a waste of time. They're not. The butt kicker adds.
If they were, you wouldn't be using them.
Right. The seatback adds, and altogether, it's the best. But if you only have one, if I could only have one, it's going to be near field. Okay, so I interrupted you. Go ahead and share your granular config, and let's talk through that.
Oh, yeah. So mine's just like yours, except for I kind of did it the other way. I've done it when I had my Onkyo. I did it the way you did it. I manually went in and changed the distance. But when you're using Dirac, you can't do that. At least on a lot of AVRs. And on the Denon and the Onkyo, well, I guess I did it on the Onkyo when I wasn't using Dirac, but before I set up Dirac. Once you do a configuration with Dirac on a lot of AVRs, it's locked in. You can't change any distance settings. So what I had to do, let's see, let me share my screen here. Jonathan, you let me know if you can see.
I do. I'll add it to stage. Okay, go ahead.
All right, can you see my mini-dsp software?
I can. It looks a little blurry, so I'm going to make you full screen if I can. Not
okay.
Let's try this. Add to stage. Can I make? Maybe I can't. Can I make that? Here we go. Maybe that'll work. All right, go ahead.
Does it look all right?
It's probably about as good as we're going to get.
Oh, okay. So, yeah. So what I did was I put a delay on my near field sub before running Dirac. And you could do the same thing, before running Odyssey if you wanted to do it that way. So, disclaimer here. I could have screwed this up completely and be saying something wrong here. So please listen, and maybe I'm saying something wrong, but this is how I did it. So I manually put in a delay on my, why does it say in it? That's weird. I didn't like my title. This is my near field sub right here. So let me back up a second. On the mini here, input 1 comes out of my AVR number 2 from my Denon. And then that goes to the output to the near field sub, which is right here. And then my input 2 comes out of my Denon AVR. And that goes to all of my tactile drivers, the back of the seat drivers, the hover EZ under both the front row and the couch and all that stuff. Okay. So the near field 24, I put a delay on that. I don't remember why I put 7.3 exactly. I did remember from my Onkyo that I needed somewhere around 7 milliseconds of negative delay to make the timing right on the tactile devices. So I guess I just picked 7.3. Put that in there. And then this is the seat back. This is the Hover EZ. Now you'll notice the seat back drivers, at least in my specific setup, not everybody's going to be the same because there's a different way to mount these, and maybe you're using an inner tube, maybe you're not. I'm not, but anyway, the seat back didn't need negative delay. I didn't know that before I tried it on my old Onkyo. I just kind of figured that out by playing music where it's a nice kick drum, like Jonathan was saying, and you can, feel that exact hit when you're hearing the sound. But man, my Hover EZ sure did, both on the couch and on the chairs. And so same kind of thing he's talking about. When I put the delay here, that when I ran Dirac, that kind of baked that in, So what it allowed me to do is to get some play with my other devices and be able to give them a quote unquote negative delay, or just make the signal hit them more quickly. And using music, what I found is somewhere around 0.5. To be honest, with the Hover EZ, it's not like the butt kicker, at least not for me. Jonathan thought the same when he was over here. It's give or take a little bit more, but right around this area is where I got the feel and the sound at the same time. And then the couch, that might as well be at 0. I don't know, but yeah, a little bit less. And so, yeah, that's how I dialed those two in. And then on the seat back, I remember thinking that I'd probably need some negative delay just because I did on the others, but I didn't. And so it has a little bit more. As far as inverting, that's something we haven't talked about, and maybe it doesn't matter as much on the tactile stuff that you're using, Jonathan. But man, it sure changes the feel when you experiment with these on the tactile drivers. Remember this one over here? Hey, Jonathan.
Yes.
Can you see my mouse moving when I'm looking? When I'm like
yes,
trying? Okay. So this one over here on the near field, if I invert that, obviously that completely would mess up the response, and it did. Like a lot of the bass disappeared at certain frequencies, so left that one alone. But that's not as much an issue on these. I'm not getting a ton of SPL. There's some SPL from the 12-inch JBL tactile drivers that I'm using, but not much. And I noticed when I would use REW and do measurements that when I inverted this way, it affected the frequency response much less, basically nothing. And fortunately, that's how it felt better too. Honestly, I don't know what I would do if it didn't. I guess I didn't have to address that. But yeah, inverting these two, which kind of makes sense because the Inuks are out of phase out of the box anyway. Am I right about that, Jonathan?
I think the original ones were. I don't know if the new NX are.
I'm using the old school. I've got all the 3000s from many, many years ago. I'm still using those.
Yeah.
But it kind of makes sense. So these two drivers, well, this one here in the back of my seat is obviously pointed towards me. And so inverting that actually made it not, since the Inuks invert the signal for some reason, or at least the old ones did. And then in the riser beneath me, the driver is facing away from me. It's facing the floor. And the couch, it's facing up because the drivers are actually in the riser itself. And I can show you what that looks like. I've got some pictures of all the TR devices and setup and all that kind of stuff. I can go through that here in just a minute. But anyway, yeah, it's just trial and error with the delay, but you have to give yourself the wiggle room to play with that. And in order to do that, you have to do it the way Jonathan showed you. Or if you're going to run Odyssey or you're going to run Dirac and you're using a mini, then put a delay on the normal subs, or in my case, I did it on the near field. And then that gives you room to play with the tactile drivers so you can have the bass hit earlier if need be.
I agree 100%. And we arrived at that like separately, independently. So like with my Denon 6700 that I had before the AV10, I had the same thing. I only had 2 subwoofer outputs. So I made the near field, my second bank, the 3 subs behind my first row. I put a delay on them in the mini-dsp. So when Odyssey ran them, it gave me that delay. And I had then, by having no delay on the other 3 channels in the mini-dsp, I could have the advanced firing from those. So the exact same way you're talking here, we've arrived at that conclusion with our own tinkering independently. And I think that's very telling, and hopefully something that's valid to share. Because
and I've never actually talked to you about that, about the method that I just used. So yep. I was kind of nervous and thinking you were gonna be like, oh no, you screwed it up. But I'm glad that you came to the same conclusion. So at least there's 2 of us.
Yep. So now that I wanted to have my tactile transducers on 3 and 4, so I can just operate them independently from the remote. So that's the reason I need all 4 channels of mini-dsp. That's why I don't have that same setup you're doing now. Why I decided to add it in the AVR instead, because I need the 4 channels I have for the 4 types of transducers I have in the seats.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's a comment regarding this kind of discussion. Jonathan, could you guys make use of more than a 2x4? Yes, we could.
Oh my gosh, I got something to show you guys. Can I show this, Jonathan?
Sure.
All right. So I don't know how to pronounce his name. He's from Norway. He's one of the like heavy hitters on the tactile response thread. You know, he's Jonathan, you probably know him. He's doing directional bass with his Hover EZ. Like he's got 4 drivers underneath him on the platform. You know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about.
So he needs a ton of inputs and more outputs. So he is using one of the minis meant for car audio. And I didn't know this until just recently. Let me present my screen again. I think I might get one of these things. Okay. Can you see it, Jonathan?
Yeah, but somehow we're covering it this time. I'm not sure why. There we go. Try that.
We're good?
Yep. I can see it.
Okay. So here's what he has. It's the DSP 8x12, meaning 8 inputs, 12 outputs, and this is meant for car audio. Obviously made by mini-dsp. So, man, talk about flexibility and what you want to do here. And this is his setup. He's got these 4 inputs going. Front left, front right, rear left, rear right. And then his routing tree. Look, like obviously can't click on this. This is actually on the form, dude. His routing tree looks pretty complicated, but you know, you could figure it out.
Yep.
And then here is outputs 1 through 6 that he's got going. And then output 7 through 12. You see the tabs up here for everything: inputs, routing, outputs 1 through 6, output 7 through 12.
Yep.
Love this. He's got separate like sub volume and master volume. He explained why that was really cool. I can't remember. It's probably on this post actually. And here's the rest of his output 7 through 12.
Mm-hmm.
But how cool is that device? I mean, you could have when you could really experiment with directional bass, and he's loving it. So it'd be a lot of work. It'd be a lot of amps. It'd be a lot of
wiring.
What's that?
That'd be a lot of wiring. Even you'd have to figure out how to run the wiring so it didn't look like a mess under your carpet. And
oh yeah. I can't imagine. So that's next level stuff. But yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. And he can feel it. And I mean, it makes sense that he can feel it, right? Especially with the tactile. Now, I don't know if you want to get into, you already have, I'm sure, in other podcasts about directional bass in your room.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
I'm going to make a thread on it, an actual video on it at some point. I just never have got around to it, but I have it queued up to do. We tried with the 2020, was it 2022? Or maybe it was even 2023. The Marantz and Denon products that got 4 subwoofer outputs, they have what's called directional bass, and that's what Sheldon's talking about. You can either have standard LFE, where all 4 channels do just standard LFE, or you can have directional bass, which feeds from the crossover down the speaker nearest the subwoofer. So you have 4 corners. Your front left.
Hey, Jonathan.
Yes.
Jonathan, I gotta go to the bathroom real quick.
Sure.
Sorry.
Just take yourself off the camera.
I don't know how to do that.
I'm gonna remove.
Oh, stop cam.
There you go. So on the front left speaker and the front left wide, they'll feed to the front left subwoofer. The front right speaker and the front wide, they'll feed to the front right subwoofer. And this is from crossover point down. LFE goes to all the subwoofers equally. So it's the idea is that so effectively, maybe you supposedly hear, and I'm using all these kind of like subjective qualifiers because that's really what it amounted to. Ideally, you would hear where the bass was coming from a subwoofer from the back left if it was originating out of the rear surround left and the left surround. And it didn't actually transpire that way. When I did a test in here with about 6 different people, I had 2 18 stacked in every corner of my room, and I set up the directional bass, and I ran through like 50 different clips. And I got out about maybe 7 or 8 clips that I thought were the best of the 50 clips. And most of the clips, to be honest, I couldn't even tell the difference. Like I couldn't tell directional bass was engaged, or it actually seemed worse than normal. But I thought I found, I think it was 8, as I recall now, it was 8 clips that I thought were the best. I put them in a playlist. I had Tim and Sheldon come over and I blind tested them with directional bass versus not directional bass. And they guessed wrong. Let's see, 15 out of 16 times because there was 8 clips. So their combined tally was wrong like 95% of the time, which indicates that it's actually worse than regular bass. And I think it's because we were using like my standard traditional crossover, and we raised it just a little bit. I have to go back to the thread. It's been almost like 6 months since we tried it, or 8 months since we tried it. We raised the crossover a little bit off my 90 hertz. Maybe I'd put it at 120 or something. I don't remember. I'd have to go back and look. But
yeah. You cheated. I mean, it might have been higher. You were really trying to cheat it.
Yeah. Well, we turned it up even higher yet at some point just to test it, like at 250 or something, to see what happened. Yeah. At 250, you could start hearing that the bass was coming from the different corners. But the problem is nobody likes a 250 hertz crossover. Like that sounds bad. There's vocals and stuff coming through the subwoofer drivers themselves. So that wasn't ideal. When it was at a lower crossover point, like my 90, it was completely, you couldn't even tell. And then when it was at like a 120, it actually was worse. I mean, it just like Sheldon and Tim, 15 out of 16 votes were wrong. And statistically, that tells you that not only did it not work, it was actually worse for directional bass than standard LFE. So that's my experience for directional bass. Now, this gentleman that has transducers set up with directional bass and it's physically shaking a particular corner of the chair, maybe I'd like to experience it. That's all. I don't know. I don't know what to expect, but I think it could be cool. But with the subwoofers, don't even bother. I'll tell you that straight. And then also, I made a thread on that in the AVS forum and invited others to do some similar testing, and everybody was kind of coming to the same conclusion that it was kind of a gimmick. So that's.
But it makes a lot of sense that if you're actually in the chair where drivers underneath you are firing from different directions, that it would work. And he wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't working. So yeah.
Now I want to add something to Randy's comment here. I've noticed, so my middle center seat here needs a slightly different time alignment than my outer chair here and here. So in my room, I think you could probably make the outer chairs match. So one setting for left and right chair and one setting for center. And we're talking like 0.05 of a millisecond. And that's that whole game that I was talking about earlier, where you're increasing the millisecond count up or down with the keyboard, and you're waiting until it kind of goes away, the feel goes away. That's about 0.05 of a millisecond different in my room between the 2 chairs. That's not really very noticeable unless you're just trying to really fine tune that. So I'm not terribly worried about it. But realistically, that means I would probably need, instead of 2 channels, one for seat back and one for butt kicker, I would need 4 channels, one for middle chair, seat, butt kicker, one for middle chair, seat back, and then the same shared between the two outside, one for seat back and one for butt kicker. So we're talking 4 per row. So that would be 8 channels on the mini DSP. And my current arrangement could make for a little bit better setup. I think that mini DSP 8 channel is something like $1,000 or $600 or something in that range.
The one I showed you for car audio is $550. There's an 8x8 for home audio that's like $900 or $1,000.
Why is the 12 channel cheaper than the 8 channel? Is it got a little better theater version or something, like less noise or something?
Yeah, there was hum. So Nolly said that he had to, run a wire from the that mini device to his AVR? I'm pretty sure it was to his AVR, and that killed it. That killed the hum. So yeah, it's probably quieter. Probably would measure better on Amir's site.
Yeah. Scope.
Yeah.
All right.
Stuff you can't even hear.
So yeah, it would be nice. I don't know. Have they gotten past the point where it used to be an issue if you had 2 mini DSPs on the same computer, you couldn't easily have them both connect at the same time because you couldn't address them both at the same time? Did you run into that, or was it someone else that was telling me about that? And is that fixed?
I tried it. I couldn't get it to work. So what I'm currently doing is, well, I've changed my setup since M-Wave, even though it was running great. I always have to change things. It was just bugging me that my main subs, I could not control them with a mini DSP, right? That wasn't cool. So as of 2 days ago, I'm running my traditional subs that are in the 4 corners. They're going to a mini that's connected to a laptop, which is different than the mini connected to all my other stuff. That's on my PC. So it's a completely different computer. So I don't know. I haven't tried it again. And I know there's tutorials on how to run 2 at the same time. I kind of think running 2 at the same time, the people that do that, maybe they at least on one of them, they must do like a set it and forget it kind of setting, and not like adjusting everything all at once when the mood strikes you on a certain song, which is like how I like to do things. So I think I'm going to get that 8x12 or the home version. I'll probably do the 8x12 because it's cheaper. Because that'd be nice just to have everything right there, right in front of me. And I do like that old software. There's things about this new software I like I was telling you, but it drives me crazy that when you change to a new saved config, it takes a long time and it'll do a huge pop. So you got to turn off your AVR when it does it. The old software doesn't do that. It immediately changes it and there's no pop, nothing like that. So yeah.
All right. Well, I want to talk about near field, and I recommend sealed, and we've got into some forum exchanges over the years where people say like ported works well enough for sealed and or for near field. Ported works well enough for, let me start again. I've gotten to some forum exchanges where people say ported subs work as well as sealed for near field, and I don't agree with that. Again, I tried ported Captivator, JTR Captivator Pros that were 20 hertz tuned, and I noticed that there was some weird feel things happening at near field. This was like 2011, 2012 timeframe for me when I was first trying that. And I didn't like
at the old house.
And so I moved it back to far field where I much more enjoyed it than near field. I know why now. I didn't know why then. And I created this little demonstration thing that I'm going to show you here on the side, why that matters. And I'll explain it first and then we'll show you. When a ported sub nears its enclosure's port tune, the driver starts encountering more air resistance because the port tune is where the air resistance is the highest against the driver, and it almost effectively stops moving at the port tune. And then below the port tune, the driver unloads and it starts excursion quite a bit increases. And so that's not ideal. If you're trying to do near field sub, you want a linear feel from it. I have a very high port tuned enclosure here that we're going to demonstrate with, but it would be the same if it's lower. So let's say your box is port tuned to 20 hertz and you're trying to use that as a near field sub. At 20 hertz, the movement of the driver is going to stop almost completely. It's going to be very minimal, and the port itself is what's making the sound. The port will activate. You could put like a Kleenex in the port and it's going crazy, and then the driver is barely moving. And as you go below the port tune, the driver starts moving again, and not only starts moving again, but starts moving in an unloaded, uncontrolled fashion. You'll get extra port noise. It doesn't sound good because you're close enough to hear that port noise, and the movement's just not linear. So let me switch cameras, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. Hopefully this will work well. But I think this, if you see this, and if you had any question in your mind whether sealed or ported was better for near field, this should put that to bed without any question, in my opinion. And I again, I experienced this without understanding it at first, and now I understand it. So I think I can show you pretty well. So I'm going to stop my cam. I'm going to pick up my other cam, and we'll show you. So camera, switch to the action camera, and then let's do that.
I know it works because it did earlier in the test run.
Yeah. Okay.
There we go.
So I'm going to try to make this big, and hopefully we can see.
There you go. Yeah, that's good.
Can I get it?
Oh, no, go back.
Yeah, I'm trying to get it bigger still. There we go.
There you go. Hey, yeah, that's really good.
So what we have here.
Oh, yeah, Jonathan, I can easily see that. You're at 100 hertz.
Yeah. Okay, good. So I'll try to move the mic a little bit so you can continue to hear me talk. What we have here is a 12-inch JBL 1000-watt driver. It's in a sealed enclosure. And what we have over here are two of my Infinity Kappa Perfect 10s over on this side. Those are, I think they're actually higher watt drivers. I think they're 1,300-watt drivers. And I have some rice on the cones of each. And I have a little tile cross, if you know what those are. They're tile spacers when you're laying tile to kind of help show the movement. Let me flip this up. Since the cone on those is aluminum, the rice was hard to see, so I thought that little tile thing would be reasonable. What I'm going to show you is at port tune, this box is tuned very high. It's actually tuned to 47 hertz, and I can show you exactly how I know that. The subs themselves don't make the port tune for a ported box. The box design makes the port tune. So if you have people always ask, like, what's the tune on that driver? Can I use it with my ported sub? Or can I use it with my ported sub box? It's not the driver itself that's making that port tune. Again, it's the cabinet. So here you can see that I have 100 hertz selected on the receiver. Volume is arbitrary. I just had it enough to make the rice bounce. And I'm going to push play, and you're going to see that the rice is moving on all the subs. So Sheldon, can you still hear me talk when this is going, or is it too loud?
Yeah, no, I can totally hear you.
Okay, so you can see the rice is moving pretty good. Now, what I'm going to do is slowly lower this port tune, and we're going to watch the rice change. So now we're at 92 hertz, 85 hertz, 83 hertz. You can see things are really bouncing around. This is, think about near field. You're getting that particle velocity off the sub. You know, you're feeling that air move like that. We're down to 77 hertz. We're down to 70 hertz. Things are bouncing real good on both these drivers. Down to 68 hertz, down to 65 hertz, 63 hertz. We're dropping. Here's 58 hertz. Where's 55 hertz? Now we're starting to enter near the port tune of those infinities. Here's 47 hertz. Look right there. At 47 hertz, nothing is really moving on that infinity setup. However, if I grab a tissue and I put it over the port enclosure, that's violent. All the movement is now coming out of the port. Whereas if I go back up high, again, there's nothing happening in the port. That napkin's not moving, or that tissue's not moving. But at the port tune of 47 hertz, that port is what's making the sound. So, I mean, I don't know how this could be a clearer presentation. It really explains it. Now, if you go below the port tune, what'll happen is those drivers will unload. They're no longer being protected by the resistance of the air, and they'll actually go out of control and bottom out at some point pretty quick. So I don't want to continue to go down. This is 37 hertz. I'm about 10 dB below port tune. You can see how those drivers are really picking up. Now, if your port was too small, you'd be getting port noise and all that kind of stuff. This is a giant port. I'm not having that problem. But do you see how the seal driver continues to make like nice little excursion? Like it's still moving nicely, but the ported subs are just going crazy right now. You don't want to have that port tune in the mix. Go back to 47. You don't want to have that port tune in the mix where you don't feel anything at a certain frequency. So that's why ported drivers are not good choices for near field subs.
Yeah. that illustrates it perfectly.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
the
so
only cool thing from that would be feeling the wind from the port, which is always cool. But yeah, that'd feel weird right around port tune for sure.
let me turn down the port subs real quick. And just make sure I only have the JBL on. I do. And the other question I get is, how low can your subs go? There isn't really a bottom frequency that a sub can do. A driver itself can go all the way down to 1 hertz, 2 hertz, 5 hertz, whatever your signal chain will push. The driver doesn't have a limit. When you get a spec from a company that says, hey, these are plus or minus 3 dB at 13 hertz in room, that type of stuff, what they're talking about is like an F3 point. At that frequency that they're quoting in their testing, it's dropping 3 dB from what the overall average line is. But that will go lower, especially in a sealed sub. It will go lower than what they claim. A lot of times, if you get like an entry consumer sealed sub from Best Buy, it'll say plus or minus 3 dB from 30 hertz. Well, it actually will go lower than 30 hertz, but it's not flat down there. It's losing a lot of output. It's losing a lot of SPL as you go down to the lower frequency. So what I want to show here is this is a $30 Best Buy driver. It's not an expensive driver, but it'll still play down low. And if you give it enough power, it'll continue to play low. So here's 5 hertz, for instance. See that driver barely moving? You have to turn it up a little bit to get it moving more. But there's a 5 hertz note, a 5 hertz frequency, if you will, on a $30 sub. And I'm going to keep lowering it. Here's 3 hertz. Here's 2 hertz. Here's 1 hertz. So at 1 hertz, it's barely moving. You can see it's still moving, but it's barely moving. Let me turn this up. Do you see it moving? Is the camera picking up it moving?
Yeah, it is.
So what I want to say here is that there's no real limit for your subwoofer as far as how low it can play. If it's a sealed sub, it'll play down to DC. It'll just not play loud. Like that 1 hertz, it's barely moving. My signal chain is rolling off between the Onkyo Pre-Pro, between the Crown XLS 402 amp, between the laptop that's putting out the signal, between the website. None of that's going to be flat. So it's got very little output down at 1 hertz, but it does play. And so a sealed sub doesn't have a bottom frequency. Like even just the other day on our AV experience, someone was asking, like, why does Ryan's room only go down to 4 hertz? It doesn't. It'll go down to 1 hertz. He's just flat to plus or minus 3 dB. His F3 point is at 4 hertz. So wanted to clear up that little misnomer as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and these are the drivers that are most commonly used in the Hover EZs, and that's what's really cool is you can feel, if I run test tones, you can feel it easily at 3 hertz. 2 hertz starts to get a little, can I feel it, can I not? But 3 hertz, you can like very strong feel it. Then of course 5 hertz, yeah, big time. But speaking of that, Jonathan, I wanted to show those that are really into the tactile stuff, if there's anybody watching, another driver that some of the guys are using. Let me see. Try and share my screen again.
I get off this close-up cam. Here we go.
Nose hair cam.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, share screen, entire screen. Share. Okay. And once again, it's Nolly. And Nolly, I apologize again if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, but so he stumbled across these drivers. He's over in Norway, so this is the site he bought from. These are 12-inch, was like a ton of excursion. I can't remember what they are, but like massive excursion. And he tested these in his seat back compared to the JBL 12 that you just showed and the ones that I have in all my seats.
Sure.
And he said the JBL is like a toy compared to these. I don't know if that's an exact quote, but something like that. Just way punchier, tactile, all the stuff that you want. Obviously very expensive in comparison, and you need a ton more power. You know, look at this, like RMS 1500 watts. But I do think I'm going to try one of these in my seat back just to see what it's like. So yeah, that's something pretty cool to look at for people that already have this kind of setup. If they haven't seen that already, they're probably already following that thread and already know about it. But yeah, I thought I'd throw that out there.
So that's going to require and be capable of very high excursion for you to feel much difference. If you try to run that at the same like levels, you're not going to notice a difference, right? You would have to be driving it harder because it can be driven harder. It has more excursion in order to get the feel. Like the cone is physically smaller than your JBL. So I don't think if you're running the same SPL levels, you're going to notice an increase. It'll just be if you get that excursion higher. Is that something you're okay with? Like, would it be audible if you get that excursion higher, that kind of thing, since it's right behind your head? All those things are things to consider.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to try it. He just said it was like a completely different experience and for the better. So yeah, I don't know. Something to try. Plus, I have that, my Cerwin-Vega CV5000 amp that I've had forever.
Yes.
One channel, since I bought the CVRs to run all the subs in the corners, the old Cerwin-Vega amp, all it's doing is one channel is powering my near field 24 and the other channel is just sitting there doing nothing. So that's 1800 watts and 4 ohms. So that would power that little 12 really nicely. So I figure, might as well give it a try.
Sure. All right. So let me see if we covered kind of the different bullet points that I wanted to make sure we hit. We talked about why near field subs are better than ported subs why near field sealed subs are better than ported subs for near field. We talked about seat bag subs versus direct attached subwoofers to a degree. I might like to touch base on that a little bit more. So
what did you just say?
I talked about the style that I have actually 2 8-inch subs inside the seat back. So inside here are 2 8-inch subwoofers in each seat. They are direct attached. They're direct mounted to the wood frame. Sheldon has a single 12 outside in the center of his seat, like mounted on the back of his chairs, which you can see in the thumbnail for this video or on his forum thread.
I was going to show, hey Jonathan, I was going to show some pictures of all the way all of my drivers at some point, but yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I just want to talk about the different feel of those. I've had direct attached 12, an MB Court driver underneath my seat with the Burke line. This is a 12-inch MB Court shallow mount driver. It's 3.5 inches deep. The 8 inches are closer to 2.8 inches deep or something. That's what's inside the seat backs of my chair. And these were underneath my Burke line firing up into my rear end versus on the seat back firing into my back. They feel different. If one is better than the other, it's sometimes hard to estimate. They're just different. In this case, I think I like the seat back 8 better than I liked the underneath 12, but it might actually have to do with the chair too, because I didn't try the under chair 12 with these Manwa seats because they won't fit under there. The mechanisms that make the chair's leg rest come out won't allow the 12 to fit under there. And the 8 seemed like they would be kind of inconsequential from the bottom, so I stuck them in the seat back instead. And I think I like that a little bit better. We tried, as we'd mentioned earlier in the podcast, we tried Hover Easy. We tried different Boss methods. I tried a Boss platform. Sheldon's tried the inner tubes. I never went that direction. I used the Hudson Hi-Fi feet as kind of little dampening mechanisms when I was trying some of the Boss type stuff. All of it feels different. How do you describe it as different, Sheldon? It's kind of hard to put it into words so much, maybe in some regards. I think the reason I like the direct attach stuff is because it's a little bit more like it's more immediate. There's not any kind of what I'd describe as perhaps a marshmallow effect that I can sometimes feel like I get with the inner tube style chairs or with even the hover, what was it called? The Boss platforms where you use the Hudson Hi-Fi feet below the platform. In my opinion, even that, like a Cannon Fire was cool. You got a little bit of a bounce, but there was a little bit, it wasn't an immediate stop like a direct attached driver. In my opinion, there was still a little bit of bounce, and I got kind of that on inner tube. There's no right or wrong here. There's people that have tried it all and prefer the opposite I do. But for me, I like the more immediate of just a direct attached to steel or attached to wood frame type feel. And Sheldon, I know you've played with the direct stuff and you like it. It's why you have it on the back of your chair, but you also like the Hover Easy setup, which is the inner tubes filled. And I want to talk about that a little bit and your experimentation with that, because you've done a lot of different testing with that type of stuff. So go ahead.
Yeah, so of all the tactile devices, including near field, my favorite Well, hang on, my camera went down again. My favorite is the Hover Easy. Hang on. Sorry. I don't understand how to work this new camera. Oh, because it keeps tracking. I keep taking it off tracking and it tracks. Why it's tracking my groin, I have no idea. But that's what it's doing. Okay. I like the Hover Easy the best for movies. If it's for music, because I don't listen to like bass heavy, low bass music. I'm a metal guy, hard rock. For music, it's the seat back driver that I like best. But I enjoy both movies and music with the two of them combined much better than with just one of them separately. The reason why I like the Hover Easy best for movies, and by the way, I use kind of a hybrid thing. I have, and somebody asked for me to show pictures, and I'm planning on doing that anyway. So let me go ahead and do that while I'm talking. Share screen, entire screen, share. Okay. And Jonathan, can you see my screen?
No, I can.
Oh, that was just back in time. That was like 2014, my first near field 18. That was when I was using Crowson's too. Remember when Photo Bucket took back all their pictures? That's the only one I could find. Mm-hmm. Fast forward to 2019. 2019 is when I read about the Hover Boss first, and I tried that first and really liked it. But I did notice that it dropped off quite a bit below 15 and definitely 10 hertz. The low stuff wasn't as pronounced even when you boosted it up. So I read on the forum about the Hover EZ, made by a forum poster named Long Easy. And you use these inner tubes underneath, like many of you know. I use kind of a hybrid thing. I have the tubes, and then I also have Hudson isolators around as well, just to kind of limit it. And I didn't used to. I used to have all just tubes. So it's much less of a squishy feel like when you get into the chair than it used to be. But you still get the full power of it because you have that sealed enclosure and you can send more power to each driver.
So people who aren't familiar with this, you might give a little more explanation. These are literally bicycle inner tubes.
Yeah. So yeah, these are bicycle inner tubes. And what a lot of the guys are doing, and I've done it too, is put a thin board underneath everything, like a 1/4 inch board underneath everything, double-sided tape between that board and the inner tube, double-sided tape between that and the platform. And that's just to get a total like vacuum seal. Now, I didn't notice that much of a difference. I don't boost mine as much down low as a lot of those guys do. And I was going to talk about that too.
BEQ.
Here in just a second. What'd you say, Jonathan?
BEQ. We should talk on that at some point.
Yeah, but beyond BEQ too, there's just a lot of low boosting that most people do. So I'm kind of an outlier with that. And I didn't used to be. When you came over, like for my youth man room thing, I was doing what those guys are doing. I've kind of done differently in the past, year or so. But anyway, you got the inner tube and then the platform on top of that, driver into the platform. And mine's what's called a cantilevered, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, where the two drivers are behind the chair. And I do that because I don't have room underneath the chair. Not all home theater chairs are created equal. You got some where you'd actually have room to fit these and some not. Mine definitely cannot. I don't mind it though. My couch is directly underneath and it's a similar experience. And recently with M-Wave, I've done a lot of sitting in different seats and I kind of prefer the cantilevered feel. I don't know why, but anyway. Yeah, so that's how that works. So then when the driver fires down, it is amazing how much feel it gives you just from two little 12s that share a platform with you. So that's how that works. The reason why these are my favorite, unlike any other TR device that I've used, it gives you that just sudden, violent, scary, huge jump scare type feel. One of the best scenes I can think of is in Dune 2, and it's when So his girlfriend, that's a good, I can't remember any character names other than Paul, but Paul's girlfriend is she's got the big like rocket launcher on her shoulder.
Yeah.
And one of the dudes is coming for her, and Paul's like yelling, "Hey, look out, look out." And she sees at the last second, she turns and fires at the guy and hits him right in the chest and blows him back into the giant tank. Jonathan,
Yep.
do you know what I'm talking about?
You know what you're talking about. Yep.
So when that hits that dude, it's like you're getting hit. It's like, oh, it's so violent and so quick and so like startling. And then when the guy flies back and hits the tank, you get it again, not quite as much, but still really awesome in a different kind of way. So when I did my M-Wave tours, I showed everybody or anybody that wanted to the difference in feel between having nothing on but the 4 corner subs, which to me is very boring unless I crank them up, and I didn't have them cranked up. The 4 corner subs plus near field only, then near field off back of the chair driver, turn that off, and then hover easy only. And it's not close, man. Which one gives you the most feel? It's like night and day difference what that hover does, and it's a lot of fun. But when you put them all 3 together, it's significantly better than just having the hover. So it's pretty cool. I was going to say something else about this setup. Oh, it's infinitely configurable. Depends on how you want to put the filters on, how much upper bass you want to let through, how much you don't want to let through, what kind of overall SPL, dB settings, volume settings you want. You can have it be very imperceptible, subtle, to like crazy, like jump scare type stuff, and everything in between. So I think when some people experience it, they think that's how it always is, how the user has it set up, and that's definitely not the case. You can tweak it how you want it. This is can you still see this, Jonathan?
Yeah, I can.
So for my couch in the back row, it's a little bit different. My drivers are all into the riser itself, and it's cone up, and then the inner tubes around that. The only thing you don't see in this picture is the piece of plywood that sits on top of all of this, and then the couch sits back on. And I built up my couch pretty high. All of these are to make it higher to give a better sight line for the screen. So put the plywood on, put that down, and the couch is a lot of fun too. This is what's in the back of all my chairs. I know that's crazy. I cut into the back of my seats, but cover everything up with velvet. It's fine. I'm currently not using the inner tube variety. I might try that again. I always like to try different things. I never feel like I'm ever arrived to what's going to be perfect. That wouldn't be too much fun. Same thing in the back. And I do, like I was saying earlier, I do feel these more, so I have to turn them down 4 or 5 decibels. When you take the couch cushions off, you can actually feel the ring of the driver right there, just like sitting right against the cushion. And it hasn't hurt the driver, thankfully, but that must be why I'm getting more feel from back there. And they just fit. I've cleaned all this up, so you can't even tell for the couch that I am doing anything. You can't see like the driver sticking out or anything like that. And then for the front row, I've got the 24. See a couple platforms here. Oh yeah, the butt kicker. I used that for a while, not long at all. I didn't give it a fair chance. I need to go back to it. It didn't add anything that I didn't already have from the Hover EZ. And when I tried it by itself, I didn't like it as much, but I don't think putting it on the platform like that is the way to go. I think I need to attach a piece of wood to the actual chair, attach the butt kicker LFE to that, and try it that way. So at some point, that's what I'm going to do. So I haven't really given the butt kicker a fair shot in here. I need to do that. And you can kind of see the velvet that covers up all the cutting into the chairs and all that, and then the near field 24 right behind. Oh yeah, and that's what I was talking about earlier. You can feel the driver right there sticking like into the back of the chair when you take the cushion off. So yeah. All right. So let me go.
What kind of PSI are you putting in those?
What's that?
What kind of PSI are you putting in those inner tubes, and how did you find your way through that as far as what was appropriate?
I experimented with more than I have now and less than I have now, and I couldn't tell a huge difference. So I just kind of went back to a medium setting. What's interesting is I've had these since 2019. Other than when I was playing around with it, and it's been years since I've done that, they don't lose any air. It's not like I have to check on them and put air in them. And you would assume that, right? Because a bike in your garage does that.
Is that what other people are experiencing too? Like, or are the people complaining about theirs going flat, or they just don't? It's just not a thing.
As far as I know, it's not an issue with anybody, and it definitely hasn't been with me. So,
essentially, do you think it's related to the fact that there's not the temperature cycles, like the cold and heat cycles that a bike?
That could be part of it. I need to just put my bike down here, right, and see if that's it. But I don't know. I think there's something more going on. Maybe the constant pressure of the weight on them.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make any sense, but it's something different. So that's all I can think of. But I'm amazed by that, because when I first did that, I'm like, well, I'll try it. But there's no way I'm going to stick to that, because I don't want every few weeks to be, pumping my chairs back up like the Reebok tennis. I'm dating myself. The Reebok tennis shoes from the 80s. But yeah, and I haven't had to do that. They're fine. They always stay the same.
That's nice. That's convenient.
Yeah. So, what was I going to talk about next? I think it was something on my actual settings on mini-dsp. Oh yeah, let me show that. I didn't show that because I do it really weird. I am in a constant search for the perfect settings. And Jonathan, you're the opposite. You're more of a get it set and forget it, which I'm a little jealous of, but at the same time, I like to tinker quite a bit too.
Well, and you're talking very specifically about per media content, per song, per movie clip, per that kind of thing.
Per mood on the same song. Like I could play Master of Puppets tonight and want completely different bass feel than I wanted last night, or even 25 minutes ago.
And my head, that is more like, instead of having a thing where I'm constantly messing with it, I try to average it out among all the different content that I have and find a setting that works for everything. So I'm not in a menu goofing around. I'd rather just work for everything. I tinker endlessly to get to that point, and I'm constantly kind of adjusting my overall average thing, but I don't tinker per content usually.
Right. And I am jealous of that, because that would be nice. But I'll be sitting there and I'm listening to a song and it'll change to like an Opeth song or whatever else. I'm like, oop, I need a little bit more chest feel, or I feel like the hover could give me a little more, Yeah. So I'm constantly kind of tweaking with that. I'm back. Can you see my screen again?
Not yet. Let me add it to the stage. There you go.
You got it?
I do. I want to try to make it bigger if I can figure out. There we go. That's a little bit. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so movie settings here. I have played with these endlessly, and I will continue to do so. But here's how they are set, and these are how they were set for the M-Wave demos, and people seem to really like it. Of course, who knows? They might be like, "Oh man, that was great," and they're like, "Holy crap, that was terrible." But anyway, what did you say?
In the car ride out, they're like, "Oh my gosh."
Oh, like, yeah, I was like, "Geez, man, that guy's crazy." Hope we never see that guy again.
Yeah.
So this is the seat back. Here's what this is going to look nuts, Jonathan. And no, it's not. That's not what I wanted to do. That doesn't look too nuts. Maybe it does. Here's what looks kind of nuts about it. This is the, okay, I got to get used to this new software. So I'm crossing over all the way to 135. Now, you and I are getting a lot of similar frequencies because you're crossing at 95, but you're doing 6 dB roll off, whereas I'm doing a sharp 48 dB Butterworth. And I've tried all the different slopes, and just right now, this is what feels the best to me. And again, it could be you know, the way it feels better to me, or it could be my chair. Who knows? But this is what I've settled on for movies right now. It gives me a nice chest punch without any kind of buzziness or anything like that. So that's my filter. This one here is the filter for the back of the seat. This is the filter for the Hover EZ, right there. So I've played around with setting a filter up here like you do. And I found some settings that I used for a couple months and really like. This is just what I'm settling on now. I haven't had the driver out of control type of thing that you have, and it could be because I have a 12.
Well, and I think yours is more centered, so it's probably not as pronounced. When my cones get to be moving, since they're not centered, because the darn headrest mechanism is right in the center, I have to put them on the sides. You get that when the driver gets moving, you get to feeling it, and it's very localizable because mine are not centered and they're smaller. Yours is centered and large. When the driver gets moving, it probably just blends in a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, who knows? Maybe at some point I'll go back to putting a filter on because I like to play around with this for sure. But I've had these movie settings for quite some time. I change music settings a lot more often, but movie settings, this is what I'm going with right now. And it seems to give like a real nice punch, but also the low end feel and the quick jarring feel. I'd say I came up with these maybe a month and a half ago. It was after you and Tim were here, but so it hasn't been too long, I guess. But let me go back to now. Here's where it looks kind of crazy. So this is my back of my seat driver again, and this is the high shelf. What am I doing? A negative high shelf or whatever I'm doing? I don't know. But to get that real nice punch feel and not have the buzzing feel, this is what I came up with, and it looks backwards. It looks like, man, that should give you way more buzz the way you're doing it that way, but it doesn't, or at least it doesn't me. So I was kind of surprised by that. I'd always played with the curve going the other way, and then like a month and a half ago I started, and I don't know why, maybe I read something on the forum, I can't remember, but I just started doing it this way and doing a higher, like I say, 130 hertz filter. And that's I don't really have a desire to change my movie settings anytime soon because I really like the way they are right now as far as that goes. And then you can see it in the other one. Yeah, I guess it's the same thing. You can see both. It's what am I using? 18 dB slope at 50 hertz. Yeah. So that's way different than a lot of the guys use the hover. They I think the most common one is to do like a 10 hertz or 20 hertz filter with a 6 dB Butterworth roll off. And I've done that many times, and I'm sure I'll experiment with it again. But this is the one that just feels better to me. And it feels better to me when it's combined with the back of the seat. I wouldn't use either one of these settings for either the Hover EZ or for the back of the seat if they were by themselves. They don't feel the best if they were by themselves, but they feel the best when they're combined with the other. That's why it's so much work to get this dialed in if you have all this stuff, because they all affect how each other feel. So it takes a lot of playing around there. What was I going to look at here? Oh, here's so this is the EQ I have on the Hover EZ. This is just for the Inuk roll off down low. This counters the Inuk roll off to keep everything flat. So for your basic setting movie, this is what I will go with. And this is nothing like what most of the guys use. Like I say, they like to use a lot of low boost. And I did that too for a long time. But what I found is so often in movies, there'll be unwanted feel when it's not called for. It might even be in the mix accidentally. The best example I can think of is the movie called War Horse. Have you seen that, Jonathan?
I have heard it's really good and really basic, but I have not seen it.
It's a World War I movie, and it's really good. But like the first 10 minutes, there's no action going on. You're just in the small little village. And man, it's been a long time since I've seen it, but it was just a constant little, I'd be like getting little burps of feel. and drove me nuts. And that's a real bad example. And a lot of times you don't get that, but it was happening often enough that I just got sick of having those low boosts like that. And so I just started running it more flat. Now, in some movies, and it seems like the more impressive with bass the movie is, the higher tendency I have to run either that, or even that, which I know looks really crazy. I think my Dune 2 settings look like that. Yeah, and it works. There's no unwanted feels or anything like that. It just gives you extra low end. And that part when she shoots him that I was talking about, man, talk about it. It really scares you, makes you jump. Without these boosts, it does as well. But with them, man, I'm not used to this new software yet. But with them, yeah, it's a lot of fun on that scene. So yeah, the takeaway, if I were somebody watching this video, and it is kind of a bummer, it's not a quick plug and play with this kind of stuff. It takes a lot of work, especially if you're using more than one tactile response thing, because they play with each other differently, and so you have to kind of do a lot of experimenting to get them how you like them, and that's just kind of how it works. If you want something simple, like I say, the most basic is a Krausen, but that takes some work too. Near field sub, I guess. I don't know, but all of them are going to take, and that's why a lot of these experts say they don't work, because they've probably never experienced one where somebody actually took the time and had the know-how to get them dialed in correctly, which is kind of sad. But all right, I'll stop sharing here on my screen.
Yeah, I'm gonna share a little bit of some of the pictures that I have on the installs. Like you saw some people asking about your install. I had some people asking about mine, so I'll share that as well. So share screen and entire screen, share. Okay, so this is some pictures of my setup. In order to get, I've gone through multiple different chairs in this theater, but my newest iteration is these man walls. And when I first got them, I set them up on blocks, and I used the blocks to determine how everything worked underneath. I made the chair fully recline and the headrest come up, and I watched all the mechanisms. I got tolerances and stuff. And what I realized is I don't want my front row lifted at all. It needs to be down low because I have short ceiling heights. I didn't have enough room to put the 12s under there. My original intent was just to do what I did with my old chairs, which was put the 12-inch sub in there, but there just wasn't room. So I decided instead to try the little board trick. And this is what you've seen that we talked about earlier in the thread, just verbally. I put the butt kicker on top of this board. I made the board go between the two joists on the bottom, and I put the butt kicker here, and I was trying that, and it didn't feel right. Like, it was lopsided feel. So this is the chair upside down, if you can't tell. It activated here, like I don't even remember which one this was, but I tried both sides to see if it mattered. I tried moving it around in here, left and right. I iteratively tested this to the point of ridiculousness. Like, my family and wife do not understand, but that's kind of how you get to where you are happy with it, is you iteratively test. So none of this worked. Whenever I would set it up, it would activate certain parts of the chair, but not uniformly. This is what it looked like from underneath. So the board is here. Again, trying different spots, trying the butt kicker at different places on the board. I tried here, I tried here, I tried here. I tried different spots to see if I could make it work. It just didn't work with that underneath. And interestingly enough, I know some of the chairs from the factory will come with the option to have this kind of steel board, a steel plank, or a wooden board to mount your butt kickers. And my experience is that just doesn't work. What I found did work, and I have several pictures of it here, is just like I said, on the actual seat frame. So this is the steel where it attaches to the springs. If you put the butt kicker centered on that seat frame, then it can't get any closer to your actual body. I mean, it's shaking the actual frame that you're sitting on instead of a second layer shake, like if you put it down here on this frame, because then it has to go through like the reclining mechanisms and so forth, and it's just not as direct or as immediate or as good. So the immediacy of the shake and the accuracy of the shake is better if it's less hops, if you will, from your actual butt. So you don't in my opinion, you wouldn't want it underneath the foot of the chair. You wouldn't want it on this bottom frame because there's a little bit of latency, resonance that gets added, and then just not identical feel across the board. Now, my chairs didn't have any place to put feet, and because I'm on a concrete floor, I wanted to have a little bit more bounce. So I used these Hudson Hi-Fi feet, and I'll show you that here. I crafted metal plates, drilled out holes to match the existing holes on my steel frame, and I made these metal plates that I bought the plates on Amazon. And I made it so that I could attach these Hudson Hi-Fi feet, which are 2.5 inch high. That's low Duramido. Actually, the elasticity of the rubber is fairly equivalent to like a gummy bear. It's very soft and smushy, and that gives you a little bit of bounce. So the butt kicker's shaking the chair, and this gives you a little bit of bounce that you don't have on concrete. I have a video out there that I can link at some point or put in maybe the comments of the video so you can see how much this helps movement of the chair. If it's on the concrete, it doesn't move at all. You just get the buzzing. If you have these feet or the inner tubes like Sheldon does, it just gives you a little bit more movement to make up for that concrete floor. So this is a picture of kind of designing in. I measured with the little tool here where I needed to drill my holes, went through a lot of bits drilling through these steel plates. I should have used aluminum in hindsight, but I just had bought in steel, and I mounted it to different chairs. Now the seat back drivers that we had talked about, I got 12 8-inch shallow mount MB Quart drivers, and I tried iteratively testing this so many different ways. I probably spent like 4 or 5 months coming up with the design that I liked the best, and this was the design I liked the best. This goes in the top. There's not enough room in there to get a tool in there or even to try to drill or to screwdriver or anything. So what I did is I used industrial strength Velcro at the top of the chair near, let me get another example up here so I can show you what the chair looks like. Do I have a spot there? Yes, here. So I'll put this over here and then this one over here. At the top of the seat is where this Velcro went. So there's the width in there. It's enough to make these drivers fit. I put an industrial strength Velcro strap here, industrial strength Velcro strap here, and then that's the hoop side, and then this kind of more velvety side sticks into the hoop side. So that holds the top in place. And then I bought these rubber spacers. I had to cut them down to size because they were too big even at 3/4 of an inch. And this is the final iteration. I tried multiple things before that, and the original one I thought was going to work didn't. The original one was nothing more than just a board cutout. Like imagine this white board, the full length of what I needed, and then I was going to use the Velcro at the top and screw it in down here. But what I found was that unless these drivers were open air, like they are here in this final model, they made too much sound. This is a hollow space made out of wood. And when you had the drivers surrounded with that board, it actually turned this like into a bandpass subwoofer box, and it was not good. Like if you could hear the back of the chair making bass sounds, and it was a high port tune, and it wasn't ideal. So in just iteratively testing, I kept stripping off wood to make it more open air, because we all know, or maybe if you don't know now, you know, an open air subwoofer barely makes any sound at all. Like it's almost silent even at full excursion. But as soon as you start, the more box you will, if you make around that subwoofer, the more it will make sound. So even just the difference between a board that's kind of following my mouse size shape, it starts making sound. So open air is the best for no sound. So I stripped back the design to just having enough Velcro to really mount it strong at the top, and then using these rubber spacers to keep the bottom of it open air. And then I had to cut these down to somewhere between a 1/2 inch and a 1/4 inch. And even there's a funny picture I'll show you here in a minute, that I had to make a little bit more material removal to even make them fit in a couple chairs, because the tolerances on the chairs weren't identical. So that's how that unfolded. I have a little video here. I don't know that it'll show. Sheldon, you tell me if this is, well, that's a picture actually of how they look inside the seat backs. So I took the seats off. I took off the fabric. You can see that it's like a wood frame in here. This was my first iteration. So I told you I had a white board. This is where I was getting sound. So there's like a board here and a board here and an open space here with a board that has maybe a 1/2 inch drop. And so I was actually making a subwoofer at that point, like a bandpass subwoofer. There was a 1/2 inch space underneath here, and then this box became the rest of the box, and it became like a bandpass. So again, unintentional consequence, but that's what happened. And opening it up where I had it where it was just the rubber washers, now it doesn't make sound. So this is a video. Tell me if this works, Sheldon.
Okay.
Showing how kind of,
yeah, it's going.
So this kind of shows how it looks. I have the seat back pulled off. I put the 8-inch in there. You can see now that I have the 3 spacers, so it's completely open air except for the very top that's mounted with the Velcro. And then these are wired in serial so that they are higher impedance than what they normally are. I think they're normally 4 ohm, and so I've made them 8 ohm. And then I wired the entire set in series parallel so that the overall ohmage drops down. But here's the mechanism. You can see how tight that tolerance is. It's like kissing those knobs on there, and I can't have it hit it because it's physically tactile when that hits as the seat reclines. In a couple cases, because the seats weren't exactly the same tolerance, this design didn't work. I had to shave these notches off on a few of my subwoofers, which is kind of silly. But look how tight that tolerance is. I tried
like it was meant to be.
I tried 4 different subwoofer drivers, I think, before I settled on this one that I liked. So again, iteratively testing. I tried different sizes. I tried 6.5s. I tried 8s. I tried putting just holding the 12s and the 10s on the back of the chair to see if I liked that. This is what I liked the best. And so here's me outside grinding off those knobs on a couple of the subwoofers to make them fit in the chairs that had a little tighter tolerance.
In the dead of winter.
The things we do for our tactile bass.
Oh yeah.
I didn't melt anything. I taped it off so that it didn't melt it, but I had to shave those dots, or those little dots, if you will, the manufacturing mold completely down. These little things, I'm not sure why they're there. They were just hollow, so it didn't hurt anything. Yeah, so that's the scenario for me. A butt kicker advance on the seat back box frame and 2 8s in each seat back.
So the takeaway, people, is with a little ingenuity, you can fit some drivers in your chair, or you can be a psycho and just cut into them. I remember when I showed you the pictures of what I was doing, you're like, oh no, your poor chairs.
Now, somebody asked a little ways back, you know, that Youthman video that's kind of notorious where it's got you bouncing around like this and Youthman and big smiles. Tell us how do you have that set up to do that?
So that was from the scene. That was from the Irene scene on Black Hawk Down.
Mm-hmm.
So that was when you were sitting on nothing but inner tubes. There was no Hudsons, and talk about cranking. I turned those up so loud for that scene. That's maxed out. But when you go to the TR thread, you watch some of their seats, what they're doing.
They're wild.
Yeah, it's and I always say I don't need more than what I have, and I don't think I do, but I haven't experienced any of those guys' setups. I mean, Shelby, I think he's in North Carolina or something. One of these, I mean, I'm off in the summer. One of these days, I'm just going to road trip over there and show up at his door and try out his system. Because maybe I would want something like that. But what I'm doing is like nothing compared to what a lot of those guys. One of the newer things they're experimenting with is they're restricting the amount of air and also making the inner tube smaller. So there's very little air in there between the driver and the platform, and getting like even crazy more. I think I had that on one of my, let me show that real quick.
So this comment I agree with on that. Like, it's fun for a smile, but it's never, ever how I would want to watch a movie. And I think you alluded to that too when you were saying there was like shaking happening that shouldn't be happening and that kind of stuff. That's my thought on it.
Okay, can you share my screen real quick? Is it up there?
It is. We can see it.
Okay, so this is the kind of stuff they're experimenting with now. So you got a driver firing into this, and you can see the inner tube there. It's like a tiny little inner tube, and that's how much air is getting through. This would be like firing into your back. And my question was, would it make it more pinpoint? But I guess the board it's firing into kind of spreads that out and makes it not so, but makes it super violent. I think they call it direct injection or something fun sounding like that, but that's another thing that they're working on. I always say I don't think I need any more, but I haven't tried any of this stuff, so I don't know. I know for most people, they're like, what you guys were already talking about was crazy. What are you doing? But yeah. So anyway, there's always something new to try.
Okay. So I think we've gone through the topic list that I want to do. There's a couple starred comments. I'm going to bring these up. We may have addressed them at some point during the show, but here's what we have. Okay, so do you guys have a picture of your frequency response of your subs in your room? I do on avsforum. Sheldon, you probably do as well. If you look in our room threads, you'll find those frequency response posts. This gentleman says, so near field can be different size brand model as long as they're the same, meaning far field paired up in the same and near field put up the same. That's not necessarily necessary. Kind of redundant wording there, but you don't have to have the same brand or model. You just need to have capability that you won't start like hitting your limits on either one. So like if you were going to, I tried a 10-inch, these Infinity Kappa Perfects that I showed earlier. I tried a 10-inch near field because I didn't want to have this gigantic sub behind my seats. I wanted to minimize that space and move the second row closer. And in just trying to get, that's a high capability driver. It's a 1300 watt driver. It's got a magnet on the back that's like this big. It's huge. I mean, it's very capable, one of the best drivers Infinity ever made. Very capable driver and a 10. But I blew that driver up, smoked it, in just trying to get to something that was equivalent to the 18-inch everyday performance, like for a tactile feedback. So you can't necessarily go too small, but you don't have to have the same. Like I don't think there's any merit necessarily to having the exact same driver or brand, certainly. No. Just that excursion and power handling and so forth that allows you to have the capability you need.
Yeah.
So
agreed.
Paul says, can you mix ported front subs with sealed near field? Yes, you can. Sheldon and I have both experimented with that kind of stuff in the past. There are certain filters, and I don't know them off the top of my head. There's a thread that Sheldon actually created years ago on avsforum that talks about integrating sealed and ported subs. And LTD02 sounded off and told us what filter to use, and I don't remember off the top of my head, but there's basically like a Butterworth 18 or whatever it was.
I think it was 24. I think it was Butterworth 24.
Yeah, you could probably find that thread if you look up.
I can't believe you remember that.
Oh yeah, I remember because it was such a curiosity. Like I remember reading on the forums all those years about people saying mixing ported and sealed is very difficult to do, and I had that Behringer Mic 2200 HPF, and I didn't have any problem. Like mine just worked, and I remember right on the forum like, I don't know why you're having trouble mixing it. I don't have any issues. And Sheldon did not have a Mic 2200, and he was having issues. And so I think I loaned you that Mic 2200, and you tried it, and it didn't have issues. And that started.
Not only that, you loaned me I had your caps. That had the sub too.
It was just trying to experiment, in the interest of curiosity, like what is going on here. It just so happens, and probably not accidentally, Behringer probably manufactured it that way. They used the right high pass filter on that Mic 2200, which was its purpose. It was a high pass filter type device. It was its purpose, and it worked with sealed subs. So there was no issue there. The problem is when you have these mini DSPs or these different types of tools, or even a built-in amps DSP, but for a sorted ported subwoofer from a vendor, it may not have the right filter to interact with a sealed sub. So then you get all kinds of phase interactions, and it does not go smoothly. So it's all about picking the correct filter, the correct HPF for the ported sub. Anything to add there, Sheldon?
Well, and that was so long ago. It worked at my seat. And I don't even think I had a back row back then. That was so long ago. But I just wonder if it works everywhere in the room. And if you have two rows, if it works everywhere, I don't know.
I haven't experimented with that as well, at least not when I've gained more knowledge, because that was back in the early days of us kind of exploring with big subs and capable systems.
It's probably more than 10 years ago.
Yeah. So this is a similar question, I think. Can the near-field subs be less capable than regular room subs? Yes, they can. And in fact, in some cases, that's desirable. As Sheldon was mentioning earlier in the podcast, where Ray went to a 24-inch sub, and to get the SPL that he wanted and not be overbearing, the 24-inch was barely moving, and his 15s were moving a lot. And so the 15 was actually more desirable because he was getting more tactile feedback at the SPL he wanted, and he could get it closer to a seat and everything. It was a more desirable near-field experience for him. So he ended up thinking he was upgrading and finding out he wasn't. And we've heard other people on the forums explain that kind of thing in the past as well. For the near field sub, you want that excursion high. You don't want it bottoming out. You don't want it hitting its limits, but you want that excursion high. Okay, and this one, we covered that one just a minute ago. How are the subs mounted the seat back? Sheldon has his on the outside, mine are on the inside. And then you covered this one. So
well, mine are on the inside too. It's just they were cut open to get there.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so that's all of our starred comments. Let me go back to live and see if we're missing anything here. See, this is the kind of stuff we're talking about. So master lessons, you say my setup can only go down to 9 hertz. Can actually go less than 9 hertz if it's sealed. And if it's ported, you're probably correct. If you're like a 10 hertz port or something. But if it's sealed, you'll be able to go.
You might have a JTR 4000 or something.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're scrolling down. There we go. There we go. Trying to add smell-o-vision and lightning and rain in the cinema. Have you been to that 4D Experience Cinema that's like the Legoland thing down on the plaza, Sheldon?
I have not. I've heard about it. I remember there was something at Disney World many years ago when the girls were little, and you could feel like your seat move, like when bugs crawled on the screen or something, and there was like water hitting you and stuff. And I was like, no, I don't like this.
They do that at that little Legoland cinema. It's pretty fun. I mean, they've got mist coming in, they've got fog coming in, they've got effectively like the vibrations and everything, the lights that are not on the screen that are coming around the theater for a lightning strike that really light up the room. Like it's pretty fun. For home theater, I don't think you want everything getting wet, so the water sprayer thing's probably a bum deal.
Yeah,
but
probably not.
But there is master lessons. There is a theater AVS forum thread on wind, and it works really good.
And that's pretty cool.
And it is really cool. The reason that I have not jumped into that, at least with 2 feet, is that you have to have a home theater PC or a Raspberry Pi or something that's going to queue up that wind track. And I like keeping my system minimal. So if you're going to play a movie, it has to have a track and it has to know the time cues of when to activate the fan. And it doesn't in advance so that the air hits you at the main listening position at the same time the on-screen action does. It's pretty technical. There's a group of guys that are coding movies for that, and it's really cool, like side project. I would be a lot more interested in that personally because I watch a lot of my stuff on streaming, which wouldn't have timestamps and not necessarily the same exact timestamp as a Blu-ray, that kind of thing. I would be a lot more interested in that when it becomes automated, like it's being sensed through the movie playback or something. That's not a project that has taken that leg yet. So let me hide that and see what else we got.
But yeah, they're like BEQ. They've done a ton of movies. Probably not as many, but they've done a lot.
Continuing down in the chat here. Here you go. How about a 50-inch Ascendo for near field? Does that work? We're going to find out soon because we're heading over to Ryan's house. And his isn't exactly where I would call near field, but at 50 inches, if you can be 4 foot away, it's in that range.
Yeah, it's for sure within 50 inches.
We always kind of have that little running wives, like I don't even know how to describe it, but basically the diameter of the subwoofer is kind of the range of where you want to be for that near field feel, for that most tactile field. So 18-inch sub, you want to be within about 18 inches. 24-inch sub, you want to be about 24. If that holds true for the 50, you could be up to like 4 foot away from it to still feel that.
And that theory is probably true, but just as true as like we said, where the closer the better. So
yeah, when I had those towers, and you probably have experienced the same thing in your theater since you still have the towers in all 4 corners. If I played something that was real heavy bass, like 9-inch nail carbon prevails or something, and you're sitting in the main listening position and you walk up towards that tower and it's floor to ceiling towers and they cover the entire height of your body, that is intense when you get up to that tower.
No, it's really cool. And I'm doing a demo, and if I'm standing in one of the back corners, back by the stairwell or back there, and I'm in front of the bank of subs, it's a pretty awesome feeling.
Scrolling down. Okay. Nicholas asks, can you hit my comments, please, about AVM90 and mini-dsp? I think I missed that. Can you put that back in there, Nicholas, so that I can address it? I don't really have the ability to scroll back up and catch all those and not lose a lot of time. So if you put
So
that back,
he's got the same butt kickers you have, right? The Advance.
I don't know. So did I delete my near
Don't
field
you have
sub?
the Advance?
Yes, but I don't know his question. I missed it or something. He says, "Did you delete your near field subs?" Nope, they're still there. In fact, I brought them back after trying not having them for months. I couldn't do it. All right, continuing down the comments. Maybe this is one of his comments. What's the best way to get a flat sub to signal my BK amp from my AVM90 and mini-dsp? There's not an easy way to do that if you're running any kind of auto EQ, unless you have the ability to turn off auto EQ for one of your channels. Like the Denon Marantz units have a way to mark one of the subwoofers as tactile, subwoofer 4. So if you wanted to run auto EQ, you could make it not apply to subwoofer 4, or you can go into the $20 app or the $200 app and turn off EQ on the Denon and Marantz for a particular subwoofer, like curtain it and bring it way down so it doesn't apply EQ. I don't know if the AVM90 has that kind of thing. If you can't disable the auto EQ application to the AVM90 on a subwoofer, then you're going to have to counter it by measuring what it is. And I do not know the process for AVM90. I'm not familiar with that at all. With the Odyssey based ones, there's tools for it, like Rat Odyssey or something like that. I don't even remember what the name of it is. Rat Bus Odyssey, something like that. At any rate, there's tools out there to measure what it is. And then you can apply the opposite of what it is in your mini-dsp to basically kind of counteract it and neutralize it. You're going to have to go on the AVM90 owner's thread or maybe the tactile base thread and ask that question, because I'm not familiar with the AVM90's specifics. Okay, so continuing.
But yeah, Jonathan, I zoned out a little bit there, but were you saying, and kind of what I've done in the past with different AVRs is putting the reverse into the mini with the near field measurement of the EQ'd sub.
Oh, you're just doing it with a mic measurement instead of the signal measurement. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
I never did that.
And I don't know if that's right or whatever, and I'm not doing that now, but I've done it in the past.
Yeah, if you're doing a near field measurement, it should be good enough to do it that way. That's not an easy thing, and it's not for novices. I decided years ago that I didn't like auto EQ, and it's confirmed every time I listen to auto EQ, I don't like it. So for me, it's easy. Like I don't even have to fight all that stuff because I just don't use auto EQ. I use it to set distances and turn it off. If you have to combat it, if you have to undo what it's doing, it's going to be receiver specific, and there's no real easy button for that unless your app or EQ processor allows you to curtain to remove the EQ from a certain channel or just disable it for a certain channel. And again, we talked about that earlier in the stream. You do not want auto EQ applying what's for far field subs to your near field transducers. It won't work. If it's dropping a particular frequency by 6 dB and raising another frequency by 7 dB or 3 dB or whatever, that all is going to be very tactile. You're going to notice it. It's going to be very noticeable that it's happening to those frequencies with the transducer that's directly attached to your chair. So that's no good.
Somebody was asking if you could only have 3 subs, like a starter system. Where'd that question go? 3 18s, 2 up front and 1 near field. That's what I would do for sure. If I had 3 18s, yeah, I'd put 2 up front and one right behind my seat.
Here it is. Yeah, that's a great idea. I agree. I'm still reading the comments, trying to catch up.
Can you use transducer? Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that's the other thing we did. That's the other thing we didn't even talk about with TR devices is how it doesn't disturb others in the house. Like when I'm doing demos for people nowadays, and if my wife's home, I'll come up after. I'm like, "Sorry, was it crazy?" And she's like, "Yeah, but nothing like it used to be." Because I run my corner subs, they're almost flat. I mean, they're like, I don't know, 3 dBs hot or something like that, and then just let the feel and some more SPL from the 24 and all the other tactile drivers that are in the room. And man, the kitchen before used to sound like the world was ending up there. It was crazier up there than it was down here back in the old days. I can't believe I haven't cracked grout, because maybe my grout's made of better stuff than what they do out Blue Springs out by the stadiums. I don't know. Oh, the orbit shifters.
Oh yeah. Well, I have the tendency to not turn down my bass, even though I have tactile transducers, so it doesn't really make much difference to my wife anyway, because I like my bass. But I hear what you're saying. Like if she was annoyed, I could turn it down and turn the transducers up. That would work.
Well, I'd probably keep it up if it didn't hurt my ears, but it does. So
sure. Okay, so this is the comment on the other one. Okay, I had so this is continuation of that. I have the AVM90 out of sub 1 to mini-dsp with dual RS2 connected. I have a Crown XLI powering 2 butt kicker advance. So your AVM sub 1 is connected to the mini-dsp, and then your dual RS2 is connected to what? Is it connected to subwoofer 2, or is it connected to the mini-dsp? And the Crown XLI 800 powering 2 butt kicker advance. So that's fine. I mean, to have sub 1 connected to the mini-dsp and powering the butt kickers is fine. I think I would make that like sub 2 potentially. But how are you, if you're running auto EQ, the problem is if you have that connected only to butt kickers, it's not going to notice that there's something attached. So auto EQ is going to turn off whatever sub your butt kickers are attached to, because it's going to think that doesn't exist, or it doesn't have a good signal. It's not going to try to calibrate it. So the problem with auto EQ that I've experienced is you have to have a subwoofer connected to subwoofer 1 and subwoofer 2 if you only have two subwoofer outs. And then when you run auto EQ, it's applying EQ that's appropriate for those EQ for those subwoofers at their position to make the main listening position flat. That's not appropriate for a transducer. So how do you get out of that situation? Because if you don't have it connected to physical subwoofers, the auto EQ won't run, or it won't recognize that there's something attached. I think part of that inherently is if you can get away with no auto EQ, like turn it on, set your distances, and then turn it off, your life becomes much easier. And you can apply manual EQ. Try like a Harman curve, look up Harman curve or X curve, or look up I just use a simple smiley face. I like dropping 1 kilohertz, 2 kilohertz by a couple dB, and just kind of fading it in like with a smiley face, like we used to do with the old graphic equalizers back in any kind of graphic equalizer. I always like a smiley face. That's what I do with my receiver.
Except the difference is and I do this too when I don't use any auto EQ, is I drop the middles off like 1.5, maybe one of them 2. I think 1.5 is my furthest one down. Yeah, whereas back when I was a kid, it'd be like, it'd be like yeah, the true smiley face.
Yeah, I can show you exactly what I do with that. Let me go to my EQ and I'll share my screen.
You're a lot like me. I think I dropped my 2K like 1.5 and my 1K 1.
And there's no right or wrong there, right? It's going to be to preference. So you can do what you want on that, Nick, as far as dialing it exactly how you like. But I'll go to the Marantz screen here. And if I go to audio, I go to graphic equalizer, this is my setup. It's just a smiley face EQ. Like if you inverted this up and down like the old graphic equalizers, it looks like a smiley face. I don't really touch 0 or 125. I'm starting to drop 250 and 500 and 1 kilohertz, and it's down here a couple dB, and then it's starting to raise back up. That's just what I gravitate towards.
Yours similar to mine, but I'm gonna try that and see.
Yeah, if you turn this sideways, actually let's just do it this way because it'll be easier to explain. A Harman audio curve. Let's see if I can find it real quick. So a Harman curve looks like, and if it goes into headphones, it's going to be strange, but a Harman curve basically just kind of trails off. And then this is headphones, so this is not what you want. You don't want any of this nonsense. You would just trail off and continue to trail off. That would be like a Harman curve. And a cinema curve, an X curve that they use in a lot of cinemas, has a curve that's similar to this, and it falls off hard about 12,000 hertz. So this would be kind of like a cinema curve up here, except for it would actually fall off a little bit earlier. So the 12,000 hertz and the 8,000 hertz and the 16,000 hertz on your graphic EQ, you would drop that more if you want a cinema curve. I like that higher frequency energy, so I kind of turn mine back up again. Maybe not as high as flat, which you saw on my screen here. It's still down a little bit from flat, but I do bring it back up. And I apply the same EQ. So again, I don't use audio EQ, but I apply this EQ. I apply the same EQ to all my speakers. Like, I'm not doing anything different for everything. Every speaker in my room is the same. All the speakers in my room get the same EQ. That's just a taste. You can change it however you like from there. Okay. What else do we have?
Graphic equalizer. Let's see how similar I am. Is it under audio or speakers?
Let me go back there. It's under audio and then graphic equalizer.
I see it. Huh. Yeah, mine's a little different. Here, let me share my screen real quick. Not that it really matters. You can do whatever you want. But... Dang it. Clicking the wrong thing. Present, share screen. Okay, you can put my screen up.
It's up.
So that's mine. I guess I like a little more sparkly at the very top.
Oh yeah, you're coming up a little bit, 16,000 hertz. You're applying it all as well. So
but
our
I'm not.
2 kilohertz is similar. You're down 2 and I'm down 2.5. You're not dropping 250 or 500 at all.
No, and I haven't really played with that, but I will. And I think you got my text a couple weeks ago to the group that I've been doing more no EQ lately.
Yeah. Man, every time I try auto EQ, be it Trinoff, be it Dirac, be it Odyssey, be it anything, I just notice things that I don't notice when I'm using my own manual EQ that are not desired. Like, I'll give you a real big example. I tried Odyssey again in the last 3 or 4 months, and I was listening to it for a while and trying to get used to it, thinking I'll just try this. And it didn't take me very long at all to just like turn it off again. And the reason was I was watching a clip from Maverick, and it was when they had the masks on and they're playing and they're talking, back and forth, and it's got kind of that high frequency radio sound to it. It's like, it's not regular voices, it's recorded like it's going over comms. I couldn't understand what they were saying. I've watched that clip before. I don't normally have problems with understanding any kind of dialogue in my theater. That's one of the things that I really like about my theater. And it was like, I couldn't understand what they were saying. And I was thinking, like, what is going on here? I turned off Odyssey and I watched that same clip again, and I could understand every single thing crystal clear. So whatever Odyssey was doing with its little granular EQ was messing up that comms. It wasn't messing up everything. Like, the rest of the movie sounded fine, but that comm scene was so bad it made me stop and try to figure out what was going on with my system, and it was the auto EQ. So I turned it back off, and everything was perfect.
I do the same.
I had that kind of experience over and over and over and over the last 20 years.
So here's what I experienced recently. So anytime I compare auto EQ, Dirac, or Odyssey or whatever to no EQ, I always think, do a quick A/B is the way to do it. And I'm starting to think that's not the case, because this was like a week and a half ago. I'm listening to music and it's just sounding better and better. Each song sounds better than the next. I'm sitting here forever. It's like middle of the night. I can't go to bed because it sounds so good. And then for whatever reason, I hit my info button or something. I'm like, what the heck? Dirac's off. What's going on with that? So I was like, it's probably just the mood I'm in. Went to bed, whatever. Next morning, got up, tried it again with Dirac off. And then I thought I'd go back to my A/B test. I'm like, well, I like Dirac better most of the time. Not every song, but enough to where I think I'll keep Dirac on. So then I turned Dirac back on. And the music still sounded good, but I wasn't having the same... It didn't sound better the longer I sat there. And so then I turned it off. And then the same thing started to happen after a few songs, where it just started sounding better and better and better. And you'll hear people talk about... This is from Tim, actually. he said that eventually the ears kind of start getting tired of all the little EQ changes and it can start to sound not as good. That's not exactly what happened to me. What happened to me is it sounded fine. It just didn't keep sounding better and better like it did with no EQ, but similar to what he's saying. So I think that's kind of a valid point. And also from my experience, I'm done doing quick A/B tests to say if I like Odyssey better or if I like Dirac better or whatever. I'm going to sit there and listen for a while and then switch it over when I'm not even playing a song, listen for a while like that, a long while, and make my decisions that way. Because I think, you know how it works, if it's even just a little bit louder, you're going to prefer the one that's a little bit louder, and it might be a little bit louder at frequencies that my ear on that particular song prefers, but not over a long period of time. So that kind of changed my mind about how I'm going to compare EQ and no EQ moving forward.
Sure. All right. Well, we've been at this for a couple hours, 2.5 hours. I think we got all the questions answered. Oh, well, here's another question. But we can wrap this up. Begin wrapping this up, Sheldon. So, if using Odyssey for one row seating, should you use all Odyssey locations to get the bubble, or just the first 3? I like using all 8, even if you're just doing a certain seat. And the way I do it, if I'm playing with Odyssey, and again, historically, I don't like using Odyssey, but if I'm playing with it, what I'll do is have the main listening position, and then the leftmost seat, and then the rightmost seat. So I have 3 seats. It's just left and right seat. And then I'll put one over the console of each seat. So that's 4 and 5. And then I'll recline the seat, and I'll do the left-hand side of the headrest and the right-hand side of the center seat headrest. And then I'll take one measurement that's kind of like leaning forward, if you will, the main listening position where your head's leaning forward. And that makes a nice little bubble that kind of tailors in just 2 positions on the left and right, but otherwise just maxes out the seat. It gets 1 forward listening position. It gets 2 leaning back in your seat, like the seat is reclined and it's on the headrest effectively. And you have to remember that Odyssey is just averaging. It's getting your distances from the very first measurement only, and then it's averaging the rest. So the order doesn't matter. It's just doing a standard average. So you want to have more positions where you normally listen in that average, because that weights it to where you normally would listen. That's my take.
How important is it to keep under that 2 feet? Because with your current seating, which I love your seating, by the way.
It's literally just an average. So if you were like right next to a boundary or something, you might want to skip that. Like if your seat was immediately next to a wall, because that would change the dynamics of the music, the frequency response quite a lot. But if you have a pretty big open room, like my room's pretty open, even the side seats are 2 or 3 feet away from the wall, and centered in the seats probably 4 foot away from the wall. That's far enough not to matter. So I want that average in there because that's one of the seats that I would listen from. I think it's very critical. I do not agree at all. You've seen some people online saying, like, if I have a mic, let's say I don't even have one on me, but this is the mic. People say, like, put the mic at all different heights, put it at the seat back, like in the seat, put it above the seat, put it like, no, none of that makes sense. You're not listening with your head right here, in the seat. Don't put it there because it blocks the sound from the rear speakers, from the height speakers, from the front sound stage. It's doing different reflections. I subscribe to the mechanism that says you put your mic about right here at about ear height, every single measurement, because that's where you're going to be listening. Now, when you recline the seats, maybe your measurements are here because that's more at a recline. And when you're forward, put it at ear height when you're forward. Like you should never be taking a measurement with your mic that's here or whatever. Like, do not do that. Put it where your ear is because that's where you're going to be.
Austin.
We haven't seen Austin in a long time. That was one of the most epic home theaters we ever visited back in the day, wasn't it?
Yeah, he had 16 of these drivers.
Way early. 2000.
Near field on 8 of them.
Yeah. Yeah. What a fun trip.
That was my only subwoofer alarm clock I've ever experienced.
And the drive over to Andrews that morning.
Oh, that was so early. It was
like 4 in the morning.
It was like dark the whole drive. Oh, and the arm wrestling. Oh yeah, he's a beast at arm wrestling.
Oh man, he beat me. There's a funny video floating around about that.
You didn't have the intensity. You had the intensity. You were like, what's happening?
Let me hit the Northwest Heavy Hitters link. I'll put that in the chat because it's such a fun trip video.
Yeah. That was over 10 years ago, man.
You know, they did one again this last year. I would have liked to come, but I had a wedding that weekend that I couldn't miss.
Yeah. Yeah, that was fun. And those guys came out here in 2017 for our crawl. You remember that?
I do. That was a blast.
We went out on Doug's Lake in like 75-degree weather in February. We thought the boat was going
almost sank the boat. Yeah. Here, I'm going to put this in chat. You guys make sure and watch this because it's so fun. Like this is how much fun we had on that trip.
Oh yeah, the Irene scene in Austin's room.
Look, cool. Ben's on here too. Rush 2049.
Hey Ben.
Reunion here. I didn't know Ben was on here.
Hey, Ben can confirm that Craig John either had Krausens or whatever the heck VR device you're talking about that I've never even heard of.
The earthquake I-beam. Do you remember going to Craig John's all those years ago? You were on that trip with us. You broke the chair. Remarkably fun. Do you remember? And then he had transducers, and Sheldon and I are mixed up over which one was which. I was thinking it was the earthquake I-beam that he was showcasing, and Sheldon's 100% sure it was the Krausens.
I bought them because of that.
We've all been there, Ben. That was unfortunate, but it was funny.
Oh, he's talking about the chair. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well.
So he doesn't remember either. Do you remember the Legacy Whispers after that at the other house?
Yes.
Okay. Just checking your memory.
Kind of a little bit of a letdown, in my opinion, compared to what we'd experienced.
Well, it was a very echoey room.
With hardly any treatments at all, right?
There wasn't any.
Those are very expensive speakers. Maybe not compared to what we've encountered some since, but I think they were like $25,000 speakers or something.
Ben doesn't like the Whispers either, evidently. He says, yeah, BS. You're a bachelor, they're okay. I wish he remembered. That could have put to bed our argument.
Yeah. Well, we went back and we talked about that a little bit briefly before the show, trying to remember which one it was. And we found out that Craig John created an earthquake thread, and he had Krausens from 2008. So it really could have been either. We didn't track it down all the way.
Great sounding room, man. That's for sure. No debate
still
on
one
that.
of my favorites, even all these years later. Still one of my favorites by memory.
Yeah.
Okay. Should we wrap this up, man?
Yeah, I would, but all these old timers keep jumping on.
Yeah, where are they coming from? This is fun to see them. All right, fellas. Make sure and watch that stream I dropped in chat of the old crawl that we did back at Andrew's house with Austin and Ben, and that was a lot of fun. All right, ending on that note, man. Sheldon, thanks for joining me tonight. Thanks for sharing your setup and wisdom, and do this again in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. All right, buddy.
All right. Good night for now.
See ya.